So welcome everybody. Welcome. Very happy to bring this panel together, this roundtable together. This may be the start of a long discussion over the collaboration that could happen between archives, museums, research, translation, education at the university level. So we're very happy that some special guests have come to RYI. This is unusual but very natural, it seems. So I would like to welcome Swati Singh from Bihar Museum. She's working as a curator for several years. I met her in January this year, and she will be our first speaker. Then I will like to introduce Swasti Kayasta. She will be our second speaker today, and we will. And Swasti has been a kind of like a collaborator with RYI on all kinds of level, and actually really bringing in the forefront the preciousness of Nepal culture, and creating bridge with RYI. Mr. Kasa from the ASA archives is with us also, so I'm very happy to have him with us. And he's been taking care of the ASA archive for quite a while. And obviously we have some friends here, common friends with Father Greg, being also a pillar in this kind of work. And then we will have to make the transition, Namila Ramacharya, who will speak at the end as an example of how already research, translation, and museology is actually taking shape already. So she will be presenting about her own research. So even though there's not many people here, we are recording and we also are online. So don't worry if we look like it's a little empty in the room. We actually, the recording will be helpful for future discussion. So your is ready to go?
Yeah.
And microphone working?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay. First of all, namaskar to everyone. My name is Swati Singh, and I am working as a curatorial associate at Bihar Museum, Patna. Actually, Bihar Museum is not only a museum; it's Bihar Museum Society, and under that society, two museums come. One is Bihar Museum, which was recently inaugurated in 2015 by Bihar CM Shri Nitish Kumar ji, and Patna Museum is already 100 years old building. And so my presentation is all about how Bihar Museum Society interpreting the past for global accessibility. So that's my thing. And when I show you the slide, you will find how museum, research, translation, gathering people, helping them to understand the heritage we are having. Heritage is not like I am working in Bihar, I am from India. Heritage is not only of heritage doesn't belongs only to India, only to Bihar. It's a global thing which should be accessible to each and everyone. So that's the perspective, and in this way, I will continue my presentation. I know the time limits, but Diana, please inform me if I take longer. So this is the Bihar Museum and the Patna Museum. On left hand side we have Bihar Museum photograph, and on the right hand side we are having Patna Museum. Bihar Museum is recently inaugurated. It was designed by Japanese architect Fumiko Maki, constructed by L&T, and It's a world class museum. And on the right hand side, we have Patna Museum. This building is already 100 years old. This museum was inaugurated in 2017. Uh, Bihar Museum was came because of vision of our uh, government, Shri Nitish Kumar ji. And on right hand side, you are seeing a person who's standing. He's a director general. His name is Anjani Singh, and he is the main person whose vision inspired CM somehow and still inspiring us to do our work in a way which is needed to promote museum vision, which is needed to promote visitors thing. So he's the person, he leads us, he gave us the reason to promote Bihar Museum. So what's the idea of the soul of Bihar Museum? First, here soul means leadership. Leadership has vision for institution betterment which serves society. Vision of the Bihar Museum to retold the history of Bihar, which is the history of India and the subcontinent, to make history accessible to its community and others, to promote, to preserve and promote regional and folk tangible and intangible heritage of Bihar, to instigate the pride among the people whom we known as Bihari. Like Bihar is not in very good state. People always make fun of Bihari people. So we are somehow through this museum, through our culture and through our history, we are putting ourselves in front of people like, uh, don't laugh on us. We have our pride history and pride culture. Even in India, people are not associated. I don't know what's the problem there. They are not associated with the Bihar history. I will tell you what's the Bihar history in the further slides. So, this is Bihar history thing. It's not an aggregation to say that centuries the history of India was, but the history of Bihar writ large. This quotation was given by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was our first president of India. So these are the entire dynasty who ruled upon us. That Harnaika dynasty, Shishunag, Nandas, Maurya, and Guptas, Palas, they all big rulers ruled on Bihar, not only Bihar, but the entire subcontinent, where part of Bangladesh and Afghanistan was covered. So it's a very long length and breadth thing. And the thing is that during that Harnaika dynasty and the Shishunag and the modern period, lot of work was done in favor of Buddhism. All the Buddhist stupas which are located in Bihar built during that time. So that period was extremely important if you want to know about the Buddhist history. Even the Buddha was related to the Shaka dynasty, and Shaka rulers, and that Shaka rulers was a part of Janpadas, Magad Janpadas, and Magad was a prominent one. So if you go through the layer, you will understand the history of Bihar, importance of Bihar in playing the role of Buddhist history, Hindu histories, and the Jain history. How Bihar Museum interpreting it for people through display and the permanent galleries, through temporary exhibition, through conducting activities like workshop, cultural program, lectures, and seminar, through exchange exhibition. So I will just show you the galleries which we are having. We have a children's section. So this is our children gallery. It's here we allow visitor to touch the artifact. So museum role is changing. Now museum is not only bound with the historical collection or with the things where curator says to the visitor, don't touch this object. Now notations are changed. Here we are welcoming people to come in our galleries, touch the artifact, play with it, use their sense, and get the interpretation of the artifact by themselves. So this is our children's section, and here we ask students to use all their senses and indulge themselves in the gallery. So this is that. And then we have a historical section where we are orientation gallery, history gallery A, history gallery B, history gallery C, regional art gallery, where we promote all the regional art of Bihar. And then the visual storage, this is very important. This is the Dargan Reksha of Mauryan period. This sculpture is already 2000, more than 2000 year old. So this is our double A category and very important for Bihar Museum. Then we have galleries like History Gallery A, B, C, all these three gallery narrating the history of Buddhism. Although they have other things also, but majorly they are interpreting Buddhist history. So on left, you are seeing Buddha in the Bhumispash Mudra. This is 11th century AD object of Pala period. Uh, on middle, it is Gandhar collection, Gandhara Buddhist history, and on extreme right, you are seeing Pala bronzes. That bronzes is from 8th century AD to 11th century AD from Kurkihar, Gaya, and it is in bronze where you are seeing Buddha in the crown. So these broad range of collection we are having in our museums, which related to Buddhist. Apart from that, in Patna, like as I said, we have two museums, Bihar Museum and the Patna Museum. Bihar Museum and Patna Museum is having the distance of 2 kilometers, which are going to be connected soon. I will show you those things in the later slide. So this is Patna Museum things, because I already told you that our dynasty, our history began from very early period. So we are having some galleries which shows those settlement things. As I said, Patna Museum and Bihar Museum is in distance of 2 kilometers. So that two museum are going to connect with a tunnel. And that tunnel is not a normal tunnel, it's a tunnel. Again, where we have exhibition space, that 2 kilometers long exhibition space. So the work is already in progress. You are seeing the thing. And again, it's the vision of CM. So work is in progress, and soon we are going to have two museum with, we already have two museum, but with a tunnel, art tunnel. And then we have, these are the galleries which we have in Patna Museum. We have recently we have two galleries which we opened for visitors. One is Ganga Gallery, and other is the Patli Gallery, where we are showing the history of Bihar and the Patna. But uh, Patna Museum having fantastic collection related to Buddhist history. So we are going to come with a gallery which all towards Rahul Sanskritayan. He was the person who brought 7 lakh manuscript at the Patna Museum, and all those manuscripts we are having. And those manuscripts are in Tibetan, and we are not able to read it up. We are not able to translate it up. And on that sense, we need researchers, we need institutions who help us in doing that work. And apart from that, we have fantastic Nepali bronzes collection and Dr. Rajan Prasad Ji's collection. So that is our library where we are having these manuscripts. Already India is promoting Gyan Bharatam project. We are initiated, we are taking part on that. But apart from that, Bihar Museum is really interested in doing the collaboration work which help Patna Museum and the Bihar Museum to bring this rare manuscript in front of visitors, not only for the display purpose, but visitors at least understand what is inside there. We are not aware about this vast history which kept in the lockers. So, as I said, I don't want Bihar Museum or Patna Museum don't want to put collection in the showcase just for the seeing. We need story, which we want to interpret, which we want to tell to the visitors. That's why we need good collaboration. So the galleries tell the history of the collection, the truth about the galleries through stories. And for promoting Bihar Museum or Patna Museum, we are doing lot of work, because museum scenarios are changing in this period of time. We are doing lot of exhibition, temporary and the permanent, temporary exhibition basically. So these are some temporary exhibition photographs. On the right hand side, you are seeing that exhibition came from Peru, and that Peru exhibition was totally focused about their ancient past. Fantastic exhibition. That exhibition came at the time of Chhat Puja, and if you're seeing that person, he's a priest and he was preaching about sun god. Fantastic thing, how two nations who are totally in different direction having some kind of collection. So fabulous exhibition. I learned a lot. If you learned a lot, a lot how different cultures having the same assimilations. And apart from that, we have a library and the research centers, cafeterias, museum shop, and we are gaining crores of rupees through this Bihar Museum shop. And here we are promoting ethnic Bihari things. We are promoting our culture, we are promoting our craft, our textiles. So it's a fabulous place. People love this shop area and they keep coming for purchase purpose only. We do activities, we do tour talks. We on the extreme right hand side, you're seeing these schoolgirls. They are actually blind students. So we are doing this kind of activities where we are not only welcoming uh, people, we are also inclusive societies also in our museum. We design tour for them and combine them in our welcome them in our Patna Museum. We do activities like painting activities and theater performance. We have fantastic. Uh, we did Binale, Bihar Museum Binale 1, 2, and 3, and in this Binale we already welcome more than 50 countries. We not only bring that country in our museum, we ask them to bring exhibition with them, and they all did that. Like in the last exhibition, we have Peru, Argentina, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Mexico, uh, even Nepal was part of one of the exhibition. So we welcome these partners to come at Bihar Museum. We have space. They bring their exhibition. Not only exhibition, they did activities also. We also welcome them to have a talk series or the seminar. So in this way, they discuss the broad perspective of ongoing uh, ongoing things, or the past activities which we deliver to visitors. So that's the sense of having Bihar Museum Binale. These all are the themes. On first Binale, we have the theme of connecting people, connecting culture. On second Binale, which was happening in 2023, Vasudev Kutumbukam, Together We Art. And in third Binale was Global Show, Sharing Histories. And these are our collaborative partners, Anant University and the Nalanda University. These are the prominent personalities who visited our Bihar Museum. PM Narendra Modi, Shashi Tharoor, and Bollywood personalities. They all visited our museum. I just want to play this because they are sharing their views here. Any sound? Sorry, it is in Hindi.
आप ये देख लीजिए, बापू साहब ये देखने लायक है। ये दुनिया के बेस्ट म्यूजियम्स में दो है। The best museum of India, the Bihar
He's a German ambassador.
most state-of-the-art museum in India. मैं खुद इतिहास का विद्यार्थी रहा हूँ, तो मेरे लिए ये दोगुनी अच्छी बात थी और दोगुना अच्छा है।
This is our team. And work perspective and future collaboration targeting Buddhist heritage. I am coming here. That's why I'm putting this bullet points here. Collaboration, help in capacity building. New ideas strengthen the visitors' footfall. Start with small talk lectures, but that should be on a regular interval. And once in a year or twice a year, we must have an exhibition which target large number of visitor, institution, and country. Exhibition also focuses on strengthen the ties on shared Buddhist heritage among nation and the people. So with this theme, I am here and I am talking with you all people. For promotion, we are having our social media team. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Because we're running a little bit out of time, I'm going to ask 15 minutes to our, and we might need, are you able to?
Jujulapa, namaskar.
I'm Swasti, as my designation mentions there, curator at Nepal Art Council. And thank you, Diane, for getting me involved in different ways. And thank you to Julia as well for being so open to my involvement at RYI. And today I'm talking about museums as a tool for research. So before we indulge into how museums can be used as a tool for research, I know museums is something that we all have visited, we all have been visiting, and it's a very simple question: what is a museum? But do we know how the transformation of museums happened? How did museums open, and why they opened, and what is the transformation that now at this age, at the 21st century, we use it as a tool for research? So just a little bit of history about museums. Although there were museums much before we know, the first definition of museums was coined in 1946. It was coined by ICOM, and then in that definition, it focused on collections which were open to the public. It could be scientific, technical, historical, archaeological, but then it had to be permanent collections. Over time, from 1951 to 2007, the definition of museums changed a lot. And in 2007, the most prominent definition happened, which stayed on for many years, almost 20 years. And in that definition, more tasks were added, in which it was a non-profit institution in the service of society, open to public, which acquires, conserves, researches, communicates, exhibits tangible and intangible collection. So if you notice in the first definition, collection was the primary interest of museums. And in this definition in 2007, after many editions of change, the concept of research actually was added, and also the concept of collecting tangible and intangible heritages as well. But in 2022, in 2023, we got a new definition of museums in 2022 August. And in that, it was further refined to also include participation of ethnic communities. This is a very big transformation in museums and museology and museum studies because of the concept of decolonization. But we can talk about that much later. Let's focus on what we are here for. I just wanted to give you a brief understanding of how museums actually evolved, have been evolving till today, as Ms. Swati also mentioned. So the first public museums, as we know of, opened in the 18th and 19th century, and then the transformation to the modern museums we know of was a very long, complex, and protracted which involved a lot of transformation of the practices of earlier collecting institutions and the creative adaptations of new perspectives and new other institutions. So just for your information, the first the first modern museum was opened in 1683 as the Ashmolean Museum, followed by the British Museum in 1753, and then the Louvre, the Palace Gallery in 1793. So what do we notice from this? We notice that before these modern museums were open, collections were only made by the few haves, the few aristocratic families. And so the collection were also objects of very rare material. And so from the opening of the modern museum, we see that there is a big shift from the rare to the representational. We also see that the shift from the curiosity of a very few people to instructing many more people. And then we also notice the museum phenomena, that is 95% of museums were founded since the World War II. So I could have a whole discussion on why it opened after the World War II, but then this is not the platform right now. So although I'm very tempted to. So the museums were identified as, after this museum phenomenon, it was identified as public, for the public service. It was identified as educational institutions, and they also were very big precursors for social stability. So I would like to actually quote this again. I use this quote very often because it relates very personally to me. When the public museums opened, elegant men and women of the world rubbed shoulders with artists and simple country folks, some proud to be there, some hoping to learn, and some hoping to be seen. So when I was doing my course in museum studies, one of my cohorts, an African American lady, she told me that when she was young, every time her father wanted to visit the museum, everybody had to dress up as their best, shoe shining, coats and collars, stiff collars, ties, and everything. Because at that time, this was probably in the 80s or late 70s. So at that time, going to a museum meant that you were a part of the elite society. It meant adding yourself to that part of the society. So therefore, I love this quotation and I wanted to share it with you. And hence, now we are seeing the changing role of museums. So museums, as I told you, the initial function of museum was only for collection, but over time, research, collection, preservation, conservation, research, exhibition, and education and interpretation became a part. So through research, only can exhibitions and education and interpretations take form. So research can be in the form of two ways. One is research within the museum about the artifacts, and one is the research about how to make it accessible to researchers outside. So through exhibitions, the digital cataloging of the collection, maintaining metadata, opening online database, virtual exhibitions, catalogs, and other publications, museums fulfill their museums fulfill their function to share the research. So we must keep in mind that everything that a museum collects is presented and conveyed by the museum. It is first an instance of a communication and seeks to enter a dialogue. And dialogue, as we all know, is led by curiosity, and this further leads to research. So how can museum collections enable research? So cultures and nations don't develop in isolation. Objects that represent the cultures of any community or any nation, they help us to tell stories of entangled histories. Not all histories need to be entangled, and compare very different cultural developments. And who keeps all these objects in custody? Our museums are keepers of evidence, and collections are national assets used for multidisciplinary research. So here I'd like to go back a little bit into the history when I mentioned that collections initially belonged only to the few, and then when they gave their collections, because they were very difficult to manage in private collections, when they gave them to the state and then the public museums opened, then museums were able to be then the concept of museums evolved, and then they became the evidence of the keepers of every culture within the country or within the community. And so these collections developed as national interest, and out of national interest and out of interest of many others besides the own community people, it became a platform for multidisciplinary research. So as we are talking about, museums play a central role in academic research by providing unparalleled access to the physical collection, the archives, and analytical tools to enable in-depth scholarly research. They foster interdisciplinary studies and collaborations, turning artifacts into data for publications and discoveries. So collections can be used as research infrastructure. Collections can be used as collaboration of knowledge production, and collections can also be used for teaching and innovative support. So what I'd like to stress here is that coming more to the topic of our talk today, art and the art and artifacts that are placed in museums and their role for research. When we talk about art, art isn't just about aesthetics. It's one of the richest way to construct social, political, and cultural history, because artworks and artifacts are products of their times. If we look at them carefully, they function like historical documents. They reflect the social structure of life, of everyday happenings of the time when they were created. They encode political power and ideology. They encode also cultural beliefs and values that are embedded in the imagery, especially when we talk about religious imagery. And they also foster cross-cultural exchange that is very visible in the art form, which I will touch upon in one of my later slides. And also art also tells us about the material and techniques, as well as the economic and technological stories of the times of the time when they were created. And they also reveal a lot about the patronage, about who patronized these art forms and the power dynamics during that time. And art captures moments of transition and conflict, as well as we all know the famous paintings of conflicts that exist till today. So art history uncovers the multiple facets of our civilization. It can be social, political, economical, cultural histories, and this we can get through analyzing artworks as primary sources that reflect societal values, power, dynamics, and ideologies. It deciphers themes, patronages, audience reactions, and to reveal how art mirrors and shapes historical context, and where are all these arts and artifacts found in obviously museums. So now I touch upon our national, the Buddhist art gallery in our National Museum. If you haven't been there, this is the building, one of the buildings in the National Museum complex. And the Buddhist gallery is divided into 4 sections, the Tarai sections, Himalayan, Kathmandu Valley, Himalayan region, and the Mandala Gallery. So I am showing you one picture of each gallery, and from that you will get an idea about what kind of objects are collected for each of these 3 sections, and it will give you an idea about what kind of objects were present at that time that made the museum collect these objects related to Buddhism. So in the Tarai section, as lots of archaeological excavations have been happening and happen till today every year, we can see a lot of pot shreds, we can see a lot of terracotta objects and artifacts. And this is because of we are looking for a history that belongs to the Buddhist, to the times of the Buddha, 6th century BCE and beyond, and after as well. The Kathmandu Valley section has a lot of utensils, as Kathmandu Valley is very famous for its metal art and the Pauba paintings, as you can see as the backdrop. And another important thing in the collection of the Kathmandu Valley is these images of the Dipankara, which belong to the Budo Guti of Naradevi, Vada number 18, and they are taken back to the community for 2 weeks in the month of August for a festival called Gula, where they exhibit these objects. And because they are unable to safekeep them during the major part of the year, they keep it in the custody of the National Museum. So the National Museum in many ways is extending its role to also support the practicing of intangible cultural heritage. Because of the safety of keeping these objects, the community were not able to keep it in their houses. And if the National Museum had not provided them the facility to safeguard them in the premises of the National Museum, then that culture would have probably died. So in the Himalayan region, we see manuscripts and we see objects in metal. And so in terms of Buddhist collection in religious and secular settings, what is the difference? That is something I just wanted to touch upon, but then Diane is telling me to move forward. So I'll move forward. So this is, so now I come to the last few presentations. So how can an object be both aesthetic and devotional is also something that we can talk about later. And then now directly talking about what an object reveals to us and how an object like this can lead to research. So this is the nativity statue of Buddha. It is in the National Museum of Kathmandu, of Nepal in Kathmandu. And just like the image of the Didarganji Akshi that Ms. Swati showed us, that is considered to be the Mona Lisa of India. So this is considered to be the Mona Lisa of Nepal. So This image, as you can see, it is the nativity statue. It has different approach. We can see different approaches of looking at a single object. So what we see here is basically the birth of the Buddha. But how can we understand more from an artwork? How can we understand, how can we use this work as a tool for our research? So it tells us about the narration of the Buddha. It tells us about the role of women during that time. It tells us about the significance of different mudras when we talk about religious iconography. It tells us about the role of in the environment. Why was it decided that Buddha would be born under the Bodhi tree? Why was it decided that Maya Devi would be walking in the Lumbini Grove, and then in midway that she would give birth to the Buddha? So why did all these things happen? What was the auspiciousness of the tree? What was the role of the environment? What was the role of the demigods in the birth of the Buddha? As you can see, the baby Buddha, and on top of him, there is Nanda and Upananda who are pouring holy water over him. So what was the role of the demigods? And when we look at this imagery, it belongs to the Lichavi dynasty, Lichavi period in Nepal, which spans from the 5th to the 9th century, which we believe is contemporaneous to the Gupta period in India. But then we see that that this image, the depiction of the imagery, has moved far beyond the depiction of Gupta imagery influences, and Nepal by this time has had its own artistic style with very elongated and slender figures, which we do not see in the Gupta dynasties, the artworks of the Gupta dynasty. So in these ways, we can see how an artwork can lead to so many different facets of research. And in conclusion, museums are not just storage spaces. They function as dynamic centers for knowledge and research. They connect multiple disciplines such as art history, archaeology, anthropology, conservation, economics, culture, politics, etc. And ultimately, museums bridge the past and the present, enriching our understanding of shared human heritage. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very interesting. Please keep your questions and comments. After the presentations, we'll have time to discuss. I'm just making sure here that we can share your.
Jojelapa, namaskar. I am Sarat Kasa from Asa Archives. This is Asa Archives. It is a public archives, one of the Nepal. And Asa Archives, मैले यो नेपालमा बनाएँ अनि मैले यो अङ्ग्रेजीमा एउटा ब्रोसर पनि छ यहाँहरूलाई है. This is a founder, one of our Prem Bhadra Kangshakar. Prem Bhadra Kangshakar, one of the most politician also. He very one of pioneer personality. Asa Archives, this is established in Bikram Sambat 2044, and this is December 7, 1987. And यो आशा सपुकुथीको लागि यो चाहिँ नि जापानको टोयोटा फाउन्डेसनले धेरै हेल्प गरिरहेको थियो. This is very supported from the Toyota Foundation from Japan. अनि त्यो टोयोटा फाउन्डेसनकै सहयोगमा यो पब्लिक यो चाहिँ खोलेको हो. अनि त्यसको उद्घाटन एकनारो हाम्रो चाहिँ नि यो प्रोफेसर युजिरो हायासी, one of the members of the director Toyota Foundation. अनि त्यो हाम्रो यो लोकालिटी, हाम्रो यो रक्तकाली वे अफ द स्वयम्भू त्यहाँ पर्छ. अनि यो चाहिँ नि अब दिल्ली नै खोल्छ, ओपन हुन्छ यो. फ्रम द चाहिँ 12 to 5 PM. यसको चाहिँ उद्देश्य खास गरी चाहिँ 3वटा जनस्तरको प्रयासले वा यो पब्लिकको प्रयासले अमूल्य ग्रन्थको सङ्ग्रह वा कलेक्सन अनि सबैले हेर्न सक्ने वा हाम्रो चाहिँ सेवा दिन सक्नेलाई यो चाहिँ प्राचीन ग्रन्थको चाहिँ अभिलेख राख्ने एउटा चाहिँ हाम्रो चाहिँ यो क्याटलगिङ बनाउने अनि यो चाहिँ विभिन्न अनुसन्धानको लागि वा विभिन्न चाहिँ विद्वानको लागि यो हाम्रो सेवा चाहिँ उपलब्ध गराउने यो विभिन्न किसिमको चाहिँ यो प्रकाशको माध्यमले पनि हामीले चाहिँ प्रकाश पार्ने एउटा 3वटा हाम्रो चाहिँ मेन उद्देश्य छ। त्यस्तै यो आज सपुकुटीमा मोर देन 8000 म्यानुस्क्रिप्ट कलेक्सन अनि तीमध्ये चाहिँ जम्मै प्रयास गर्यो पूजाआजा अनि चाहिँ औषधि विज्ञान तन्त्र मन्त्र ज्योतिषी वेद पुराण शैव बौद्ध शाक्त सम्प्रदायका तान्त्रिक पुस्तक त्यस्तै महायान वज्रयान र अरू सम्प्रदायका पनि धेरै ग्रन्थहरू अनि धार्मिक र अन्य निर्माण सम्बन्धी आर्कोलोजी वा त्यस्तै चाहिँ वास्तुकला त्यस्तै प्राविधिक साङ्केतिक नक्सा त्यसको चाहिँ सुन्दर डिजाइनको चाहिँ अत्यन्तै राम्रा कलात्मक ढङ्गले लेखिरहेको चित्रहरू ग्रन्थहरू धेरै चाहिँ यहाँ कलेक्सन वा चाहिँ सङ्ग्रह छ। विशेष गरी हाम्रो चाहिँ यो कन्जर्भेसन र प्रिजर्भेसनको चाहिँ काम यो नागोया जापानको बुद्धिस्ट लाइब्रेरी अफ जापानसँग मिलेर आशा सपुकुटीले यो कम्प्युटरमा डेटाबेस प्रोग्राम बन्ने चाहिँ यो सिडी-रोममा राख्ने हाम्रो यो चाहिँ डिजिटाइज यो प्रोजेक्ट 1997 देखि चाहिँ सुरु भयो। हाम्रो फर्स्ट फेजमा यो 5309 यो ग्रन्थ पुस्तक हामीले चाहिँ स्क्यान गर्यौँ अनि सेकेन्ड फेजमा हामीले चाहिँ 1999 मा यो चाहिँ क्यामेराले हामीले चाहिँ डिजिटाइज गरेर कुल फर्स्ट फेजमा हामीले चाहिँ 7025 म्यानुस्क्रिप्टको हामीले चाहिँ डिजिटाइज गर्यौँ। यो जापानको चाहिँ बुद्धिस्ट लाइब्रेरीको चाहिँ प्रमुख श्रद्धेय प्रेमबहादुर कंशकारको मूल शिष्य स्युचो ताकावाकाजुको चाहिँ पहल र उहाँको चाहिँ सहयोगमा हामीले चाहिँ यो चाहिँ कार्य गरेका थियौँ र यो कार्यसँगै यसमा चाहिँ जम्मै ग्रन्थ र त्यसमा भएको चाहिँ चित्र फिगर चित्रावली त्यो कम्प्युटरको माध्यमबाट हामीले चाहिँ अब अध्ययन गर्न सकिन्छ। वी क्यान स्टडी फ्रम द डिजिटाइज। अनि पछि यसको चाहिँ नि हामी कहाँ चाहिँ यो ताडपत्र पाम्फलेट पनि छ। यो पाम्फलेट चाहिँ नि अबाउट चाहिँ 1200 को चाहिँ सङ्ख्यामा चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ यो चाहिँ कन्जर्भेसन एन्ड प्रिजर्भेसन अफ पेपर एन्ड पाम्फलेट म्यानुस्क्रिप्ट कलेक्सन इन नेपाल भनेर चाहिँ त्यो शीर्षकमा यो 2005 जुलाई 11 तारिकको दिन हामीले चाहिँ यो चाहिँ गोष्ठी गरेर फर्स्ट फेजमा 400 यो ताडपत्र हामीले चाहिँ यो डिजिटल स्क्यान गरेर चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ डिजिटाइज गर्यौँ। त्यस्तै चाहिँ सेकेन्ड फेज चाहिँ 2006 नोभेम्बर 8 तारिकको दिन हामीले फेरि त्यस्तै गोष्ठी गरेर अरू फेरि 400वटा 400 चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ डिजिटाइज गर्यौँ अनि बाँकी रहेको अरू 400वटा 400 चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ 2007 मा यो नोभेम्बरमा चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ सुरु गरेर टोटल अबाउट चाहिँ 1200 को चाहिँ यो चाहिँ पाम्फलेटको हामीले चाहिँ डिजिटाइज गरेर चाहिँ हाम्रो यो संरक्षण पनि हामी चाहिँ गरेँ। अनि यो ताडपत्र चाहिँ यो ताडपत्रको चाहिँ जुन चाहिँ कार्य भयो यो चाहिँ पेपर कन्जर्भेटर्स एसिया अनलिमिटेडका कन्जर्भेटरहरू नाओको ताकागी रेईको माएदा र युरिको चुरोको चाहिँ विशेष चाहिँ सहयोग र उहाँहरूको चाहिँ हाम्रो चाहिँ धेरै चाहिँ सपोर्टिङ उहाँहरूको छ। त्यस्तै अहिले हालसालै जर्मनीको सेन्टर फर स्टडिज कल्चर म्यानुस्क्रिप्ट कल्चरको चाहिँ यो युनिभर्सिटी ह्याम्बर्गको चाहिँ सहयोगमा र त्यस्तै हिल म्युजियम एन्ड म्यानुस्क्रिप्ट लाइब्रेरी सेन्ट जोहन्स युनिभर्सिटीको सहयोगमा हामीले सन् 2019 जुलाईदेखि यो चाहिँ 17-18 र पछि चाहिँ 24-26 को दिन यो युनिभर्सिटीका प्रोफेसर मिसेल बिडल उहाँले चाहिँ एउटा चाहिँ टाइम पनि दिनुभयो अनि उहाँकै निर्देशनमा यहाँका राष्ट्रिय अभिलेखालय केसर लाइब्रेरी आदिका प्रतिनिधि समेतलाई चाहिँ यहाँ चाहिँ सहभागी गराएर हामीले यो अहिले यो डिजिटाइज अथवा चाहिँ हाम्रो चाहिँ यो चाहिँ संरक्षणको कार्य चाहिँ सुरु गर्दैथ्यौँ र यो प्रशिक्षण पश्चात चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ पछिको लटमा एबाउट चाहिँ 1200 जति चाहिँ पाण्डुलिपिको चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ ग्रन्थको चाहिँ समुच्चयन डिजिटाइज गर्ने कार्य चाहिँ अहिले भइरहेछ। यस कार्यमा चाहिँ यो चाहिँ म्यानुस्क्रिप्ट कल्चरका प्रतिनिधि डाक्टर विदुर भट्टराईको चाहिँ यहाँ विशेष योगदान छ। उहाँकै चाहिँ संयोजनमा अहिले चाहिँ हामी चाहिँ कार्य गरिरहेका छौँ। र आशा सपुकुटले चाहिँ नि विद्वान अनि अन्वेषक उहाँहरूले चाहिँ दिँदै आइरहेको चाहिँ एउटा उल्लेखनीय सेवा भनेको चाहिँ त्यहाँ चाहिँ हाम्रो चाहिँ लाइब्रेरी चाहिँ सुविधा, त्यसको प्रतिलिपि वा फोटोकपी वा डिजिटाइज कपी लिन सक्ने, त्यस्तै प्राचीन ग्रन्थको चाहिँ न्यून प्रतिलिपि थोरै शुल्क मात्रै तिरेर पनि हाम्रो चाहिँ यो कम्प्युटर लेजर प्रिन्ट वा त्यस्तै चाहिँ हाम्रो चाहिँ सफ्ट कपी पनि लिन सक्ने सुविधा छ। अहिले चाहिँ डिजिटाइज गरिएको चाहिँ यो प्राचीन ग्रन्थको चाहिँ सिडी कपी चाहिँ पनि यो चाहिँ सुविधा छ यो चाहिँ लिने। अनि यो चाहिँ विगत चाहिँ त्यस्तै 20-25 वर्षको चाहिँ भित्रमा चाहिँ अमेरिका, बेलायत, फ्रान्स, जर्मनी, स्विडेन, हल्यान्ड, जापान, भारत, अस्ट्रेलिया र थाइल्यान्ड विभिन्न देशका विभिन्न मुलुकका चाहिँ विद्वानहरू चाहिँ आशा सपुकुटीमा आउनु भए चाहिँ त्यहाँका चाहिँ सुविधा प्रयोग गरेर आफूलाई चाहिने सेवा चाहिँ उपलब्ध गर्नुभएको छ है। त्यस्तै अब यहाँ चाहिँ विभिन्न यो प्रिन्टेड बुक स्पेसल्ली नेपाल भाषा नेवार बुक्सहरू र बुद्धिस्ट चाहिँ नि टेक्स्टहरू पनि यहाँ चाहिँ सङ्ग्रहित छन्। र अहिले चाहिँ नि विभिन्न चाहिँ नि सङ्कायका विद्यार्थीहरू पनि विभिन्न विषयमा चाहिँ आफ्नो चाहिँ अध्ययनको सिलसिलामा आफ्नो चाहिँ केही चाहिँ नि रिपोर्टिङ चाहिँ गर्ने वा चाहिँ आफ्नो चाहिँ केही चाहिँ थेसिस चाहिँ त्यो प्रपोजल आदि थेसिस निर्माण गर्ने त्यसको कार्यमा पनि यहाँ सहभागी छन्। अहिले चाहिँ यो नेपालको साँच्चै एउटा अहिले जनस्तरीय रूपमा एउटा चाहिँ पब्लिक आर्काइभ्सको रूपमा चाहिँ यो चाहिँ अनुसन्धानको चाहिँ केन्द्र चाहिँ नि यसको चाहिँ निर्माण चाहिँ हुँदैछ। त्यस्तै चाहिँ यो आशा सपुकुटी वान अफ द चाहिँ नि पब्लिक आर्काइभ्स भएको हुनाले सबैको लागि सरल तरिकाले सहज तरिकाले यो चाहिँ नि आउन सकिने वा चाहिँ अध्ययन गर्न सकिने वा चाहिँ त्यहाँको चाहिँ नि सेवा सुविधा लिन सक्ने यो चाहिँ आर्काइभ्स हो। थ्याङ्क यू, यति मात्रै छ।
Namaste, everyone. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come share my research with you all. It's a privilege to sit next to you all, such professionals, and share my research. I hope I offer something useful to the discussion. Okay, so for my MA thesis, I am working on illustrated manuscripts, Arya Manushi Nama Samgiti manuscripts from Nepal, and the role of imagery in Newar Buddhist community. So in the study, I basically focus on images that are found in this text called Nama Samgiti in Tibetan Jambal Chenjo, translated as chanting the names of Manjushri. These images present a unique Nepalese development in Buddhist visual culture whose philosophical underpinnings has not been fully explored. So this is exactly what I'm trying to do in this research. So for the content, I will firstly give a quick description of Manjushri Nama Samgiti, then its role in Newar Buddhist community, my main questions, my core argument, some methodology, and I'll show you my materials, show you how it's related with the text, and some theoretical frameworks briefly. Yeah, so to start with, what is Nama Samgiti? It is a Buddhist tantric text. The origin of the text is not yet confirmed, but from the commentarial tradition, it is placed around the 6th century. So in the first chapter, Vajrapani requests Shakyamuni Buddha to reveal the chanting of the names of Manjushri. This scene is also beautifully depicted in this painting by Samundar Man Singh Shrestha. This text comprises of 800 various names of Manjushri. Important thing to note here is that Manjushri here is not just a bodhisattva of wisdom, but actually here a non-dual gnosis being also described as Adi Buddha, a primordial Buddha. Obviously, there are many interpretation of what Adi Buddha is, but from my research, I kind of found a common thread among them, and that is Adi Buddha is beginningless and uncaused, serving as a primordial ground from which enlightenment manifests. So this is the role of Manjushri here. So this text is composed of 167 verses in Anushtub meter, followed by a prose section that praises of Nama Samgiti and describes the benefit of reciting it, of meditating on the figure of gnosis being Manjushri. Ronald Davidson actually asserts that having this opening and close verses often represent a later stratum in the development of the text. This suggests that the text evolved over time reflecting early stages of Indian Tantric Buddhism. Obviously, the text itself is very hard to understand, like the core meaning. So there are many commentaries, and they all classify this text differently. Some Yogatara Tantra, some Kala Chakra Tantra. So there are many of them. So talking about its role in Newar Buddhism, just to be clear, Newar Buddhism is a form of Vajrayana Buddhism practiced by the inhabitants of Kathmandu, Newars. Yeah, so the chanting tradition is quite prominent here. Actually, that's how I started, like my interest in this started from when I joined one of this session in Hiranavarna Mahavihar. I have a short clip from that day. So yeah, so in Nepal, where Manjushri is a legendary creator of Kathmandu Valley, where Dharmadhatu Vagishwara Mandala is inscribed in so many temples, monasteries, it is still chanted as part of daily rituals in so many bahas. So yeah, the chanting tradition is quite prominent. And what I also noticed is when they chant, they put this image of Nama Samgiti in front, they offer butter lamps, flowers, and then they chant. So that's the imagery and the chanting sort of interest got me interested into this topic, and that's what I am doing. So that brings to my main research question: what is the purpose, function, dimension of the visual world of Arya Manjushri Nama Samgiti manuscripts? To address this comprehensively, I break it down into more specific questions like what images appear in the manuscript, how do they relate with the text philosophy, what role do they play? So this is like the main questions that guide my entire thesis. So my core argument is that the images found in Namasangita manuscripts of Nepal are closely connected with the doctrinal content of the text. Actually, Pal suggested that most manuscript images bear little to no relation to the text and are primarily prophylactic, meant to ward off harm, but I actually don't completely agree with this, especially based on my findings. For Namasamgiti, at least, it is clear that Namasamgiti image is closely connected. I'll show you how in a bit. So my purpose is to show that images function as instrument of Buddhist teachings, as visual dharma that works alongside textual dharma, thereby guiding practitioners towards enlightenment. So some of my methods are iconographical analysis, comparative analysis, where I read images against textual description, commentary traditions, and more information is gathered. Another important part is I include interviews as well with the Newar priest who have been like directly engaged with the text and who has been teaching Namasamgiti. So I also communicated with them, questioned about their understanding, their interpretation, to see how kind of they view the images and how it affects the practitioners. And for the materials, I'm in the illustrated Namasangi manuscripts are my primary sources. Sources are obviously from Asha Archive. Sharaji kindly helped me when I went there as well. Then I went to National Archive. There are digital collections from different museums, project, private collections. So yeah, these are my main sources. Many of them are undated, but from those which mentioned, the manuscripts are mostly from 12th century and 19th century. I've examined over 40 manuscripts, on which more than like 15, 16 were illustrated. They're all in, from Nepal, they're all in Sanskrit language, but they're in different script. So some are in Prachalit, some are in Ranjana, some in Bujim also. I'll show in the next slide some of the examples of them. Then to understand the Namasangiti text itself, I rely on like the scholars who have worked on Namasangiti directly, like Alex Wimon, Anthony Drive, even Dina Bangdils, Julian Schott, and another major source of data is obviously the interviews. So these are some of the manuscripts that I found. These are some of the early manuscripts. The first figure one is from National Archive. So it is undated, but since it's in palm leaf, we can assume that it's from the earlier period because papers were introduced only around the 13th century. So this is one of the oldest manuscript. The first image that is present there is of the deity Manjushri Nama Samgiti. And the second image is this deity called Yamantaka, who is also known to be emanation of Manjushri. And about this deity, the Manjushri text itself talks about this deity in one of the verses. So that's how we can see it's kind of connected, the Yamantaka. Then the second figure is from LA Country Museum of Art collection. The folios consist of image of Bodhisattva Manjushri, Namasamgiti Manjushri, Shakyamuni Buddha, and the script is in Ranjana. The materials are also kind of different. Then these are all from National Archives. Sorry, did I say National Archive? It's from Asha Archive. It's from Asha Archive. Yeah, he was like, huh? It's from my. It's from Asha Archive. It's in Prachalit Lipi. And all of these images, you can see the deity Manjushri Nama Samgiti. This deity is known as the personification of the text. Yeah, I think I'll quickly go over them. These are also from Asha Archive, except the figure 3, that's from Rare Buddhist manuscript collection. Just quickly see if I'm forgetting something. Yeah. So yeah, you can see that the deity Manjushri Nama Samgiti is mostly in the first folio and it's quite there. Then we also have covers of manuscript. The figure 9 is from 12th century, from Walter's Art Museum collection, and the figure 10 is from Rare Buddhist manuscript as well. So together with Nama Samgiti deity, there is also Shakyamuni Buddha, Maitreya Buddha, Vasundhara Devi with bodhisattvas, and in the bottom pictures, there is also Pancha Buddha, which is also important considering the theme of the Nama Samgiti is the Pancha wisdom, like the 5 wisdom. So it all makes sense to be included in this manuscript. Then there are also manuscripts which is very unusual. This is the image of Pancharaksha deities included in Nama Samgiti text. So actually, Jina Kim, I'll quote her. She suggests that in Nepalese illustrated Pancharaksha manuscripts, the 5 deities often appear together with the 5 Tathagatas of their respective colors. The configuration and color scheme of 5 goddesses makes easy to associate with the 5 transcendental Buddhas. So that's maybe one of the reasons why this is included. There are also more deities which I'm yet to identify. This is my to-do list. And okay, so because as you might have noticed, the deity is quite like it's repetitive. So I'll quickly go through the 6 pairs. There is Abhay Mudra, Tarpan Mudra, Samadhi Mudra. Then there is sword and sword and the book, or sometimes it's Katwanga. Then there is bow and arrow, and Vajra Chakra Mudra, which is symbolizing Mount Meru. This is one of the key sort of mudra that helps us recognize this deity. So description of this form can be found in later texts such as Dharmakosha Sangraha as well as Benitius Bhattacharya. So talking about the relation of the image with the text, it is important to understand the main content of the text, and that is the 5 wisdom, namely the wisdom of Dharmadhatu, mirror-like wisdom, wisdom of equality, discriminating wisdom, and all-compassing wisdom, which is also symbolized by 5 Buddha families. So that's the main kind of theme of Nama Samgiti. There is also another main idea, that is of 6 schooler system, which is the combination of 5 Buddhas and Vajrasattva. Sorry, I'm panicking a little bit. It's very like, yeah, so the Vajrasattva and 5 Buddhas, so that's the 6 schooler systems. And how is this image related? So Dina Bangnil says that the attributes and gesture symbolizes the 5 Buddha plus Vajrasattva, reflecting the 6 schooler system expounded in the Nama Samgiti itself. So basically the image of the 12-armed Nama Samgiti is symbolizing the 5 Buddha and Bodhisattva. But the interviews kind of suggest similar thing, but they kind of replace Bodhisattva with Manjushri sometimes. But The thing is, Vajrasattva is also considered Adibuddha, and so as Namasamgita. So you can see that it's kind of equated here. There's no concrete textual evidence to show this interrelation. However, through interviews and observation, it is clear that this narrative of being like the deity being the personification of the wisdom and bodhisattva is quite strong and quite there among the Nevar Buddhist community. So I'll quickly go through some of the frameworks. So how I see these images. First up, I've used Yogacara thought. Yogacara ideas provide key interpretive lens for understanding why images matter. Lusthouse writes that our action, emotion, concerns, and orientation are shaped by how we experience, how we cognize. So according to Yogacara philosophy, our habitual patterns of perception are shaped by karma and our tendency to cling. So they distinguish between conditioned knowledge formed through repeated exposure and direct pure knowledge. What we repeatedly see and images create patterns in our consciousness, in our alayavikana, right? So this is where imagery becomes functional, like repeated visualization of pure forms like Namasamgita deity can transform how the mind perceives reality. So when engaged through Yogacara philosophical lens, the image can help practitioners move from habitual conditioned way of seeing to more direct non-dual awareness of reality. So that's how this can be connected. Of course, there's more to say for the Yogacara philosophy, but I'll skip that for now. Another concept that I want to bring up is visual literacy theory. So what this theory is saying that is that in modern times, it is like scholars like Feldman argue that the people increasingly rely on visual communication. Let me read. I think I'm speaking way too fast. So yeah, traditionally we say that literacy is just reading and writing, but with visual literacy, it's more like you also need to learn the images to understand better. But it seems that Nevar Buddhist communities have long engaged in practices that align with this kind of contemporary visual literacy theories. Analyzing the form, content of Namasangiti, their precise iconography, symbolic representation, all of this require visual literacy. So this also kind of makes sense here. And the final one is material culture theory, which reminds that manuscripts are not neutral carriers of text, but sacred objects whose material presence mediates power, blessing, and awakening. We can still see how even today the manuscripts are object of worship. For example, the Pragyaparamita literature, even the Namasangiti manuscript, in one of those covers, I found vermilion powders, which kind of suggested that this was also used in rituals, it was also worshipped. So just as Tibetan tankas, which are not merely works of aesthetic value, but also considered vessels of power, what Tibetan text describes as receptacles, here mind receptacle, images in Namasamgiti manuscript also function as ritual support and devotional media integral to the lived religious world of Nevar Buddhism. So through this lens, images function ritually and soteriologically, supporting the practitioner's path. And to conclude, the 12 Ram Manjushri is the most frequently depicted image in the manuscripts that were examined. When read through Yogacara philosophy, these images function as perceptual and meditative support. Through visual literacy, they emerge as intentional modes of communication. Through material culture, they appear as ritual object with merit and transformative power. So basically, that Namasamgita images function as visual dharma. They shape perception and guide practice in the ways that parallel with textual instruction. Visual dharma complements textual dharma. So yeah, and finally, illustrated manuscripts are a valuable source of knowledge, and greater accessibility to them would further help support research in this field. So that's that. These are some of my reference list. Thank you for listening. Sorry, I can't.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm wondering if we should keep the question and answer period for after the break for tea. Would that be okay? Everybody would be, so we have a chance to kind of like get up, drink, exchange. Then we come back and we'll have a session basically focusing on translation, and I'm inviting two different forms of translation here: a living tradition with Lopenla, who is teaching from the texts, which we often find in museums, and our director of program, Julia, who just published 2 books as a translator, and so she can speak to that end, and perhaps even start the discussion on how it relates with museum and also with research. So for this session, what is interesting is that we have a little bit like an example of what RYI is about. We have the tradition, monastic tradition, and we have the academic scholar practitioner from the academic side of. So, and this is a special time, and it will be helpful if we have questions and answer to kind of interact from this point on. And Julia will lead us on this.
Thank you everyone for coming. So our part of this event is a roundtable on translation, Lopen Jibikuntang and myself. And we will start out by having an introduction to a traditional approach to translation, and then lead over to a roundtable discussion that also involves all of you. And at that time, I will reveal which kind of question we could debate about. So first of all, let's hear Lopen Jibikuntang, and maybe you can also give a tiny little bit of self-introduction, then it is more easy to relate to and know who we are. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jigme Kungsang Sherpa, and I have completed my studies in a traditional monastic monastic way, and it's like a 9-year of curriculum. We have to study like sutras and tantras, texts, commentaries based on 13 treatises. And yeah, after I completed my studies, I get to know how the Western academics are engaging with Buddhism, and I've also learned so many different ways of engaging Buddhism and in today's talk, and I really appreciate all of this. Yeah, it was really insightful for me too. So first of all, I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to participate in this program and to share my time, and also thank you for sharing your time. I was really excited when Professor Dian asked me to share my understanding on the traditional transmission from the monastic perspective, because within our tradition, this is very precious. So I'd like to reflect on a few aspects of traditional transmission. Okay. Firstly, how texts are received. From the very beginning, the Buddha's teachings have been preserved and continued by his disciples through oral transmission from teachers to students. In this process, like various cultural and religious background have also played an important role in shaping how Buddhism is expressed. The Buddha's teachings are understood as a union of learning, contemplating, and meditation. When students embody these methods and become genuine practitioners, only then they are capable of guiding others on the path. This shows the authenticity of Buddhist teachings as they have been continued by realized masters, and in the way that the path remains genuine and unmistaken. From my perspective, the purpose of Buddhist texts is to transform the mind with wisdom and peace, not only just informational. So this is related to the role of the teacher, and a teacher guides students on the path by identifying misunderstandings, especially since teachings can be interpreted differently depending on conditions such as timing and students' capacity. For example, students need to be guided with appropriate teachings at different stages of their lives. Like they also, like faculties also differs in terms of how they learn, and it needs to be well understood. Teachings must be explained according to the student's level of wisdom and faith. For this reason, a strong relationship between teacher and student is very essential. Like also, and teacher and lineage holders also have a responsibility to make sure that translations are accurate and do not lead to misunderstanding. This requires careful collaboration between teachers and translators. We can learn this from the past, from Indian and Tibetan scholars. Like they were very strict while translating the scriptures, and we can, like after the translation of the scriptures, many acharyas and panditas used to gather, and they used to check thoroughly like each and every word is, if it's translated well or not, and it's really a way that needs to be done. So this also connects to how teachings are explained, especially between oral explanation and written text. Within the Tibetan or Himalayan traditions, oral explanation is often valued more than written words because it carries the teacher's direct experience. These pith instructions help communicate complex ideas in a simple, clear, and meaningful way. Such explanations help practitioners apply effective methods for realization, as the pith instructions are more connected with the student itself. The teacher has to analyze what level of wisdom and faith the student carries. So without guidance from a teacher, Buddhist texts may remain only as historical material without deeper understanding. Although texts displayed in museums can inspire and respect, according to living tradition, they do not become truly meaningful unless they are experienced and practiced. As the Buddha taught, the Dharma is meant to be applied into one's life, not only respected. So another important aspect is secrecy and appropriateness in teaching. In general, basic teachings can be shared publicly, while more subtle and complex topics should be taught step by step according to a student's preparation. This restriction is not to hide anything, but to make sure the teachings are beneficial to the learners. For example, teaching on emptiness can be explained differently depending on the audience. Similarly, mantras, ritual instructions, and advanced texts are often reserved for more experienced practitioners. At the same time, in some contexts, these teachings may be shared more openly, recognizing that all beings possess Buddha nature. So finally, we can reflect on what it really means to preserve a text. Preserving manuscripts is important for maintaining the Dharma, as these texts serve as the basis for transmitting teachings to many people. If the original text is lost, readers may doubt the edition, is it authentic or not, whether, and also these days we can see digital form of a text, and it's really fortunate for us that we have this digital modern thing that we can rely on. But still, it's not 100% sure that we can secure this digital form in data, data's 100% sure. We need to be very careful to how we can secure all these datas. Also, for instance, many scriptures were lost during disturbances at Nalanda, and in other circumstances, a large number of Buddhist texts were destroyed, and it's really a disheartening moment for all of us. Teachers still tell this story to possibly avoid such a situation. This shows that preserving text is really important for us. On the other hand, archives can preserve history, but they are not sufficient on their own. Dharma remains alive only when it is realized and practiced in the minds of individuals, even in the modern world. For me, this is the place where tradition, translation, research, and museology come together. So there's a lot more that could be said, but I hope that this kind of brief overview has given you some general insights into the traditional transmission and how these teachings are kept alive, or why it's so important still today. And thank you.
Thank you, Lopinla, for sharing your insights. To give you a little bit of background, when I became a Buddhist at the age of 21, for 15 years, your approach to text and to the Dharma was exactly that. I learned with a traditional teacher, and I was told and experienced that it is crucial that the transmission lineage of what we receive is alive, and the teachings really come to life only through the living example of a teacher. And you explained very beautifully how all of that comes together. Then for this roundtable, and thank you for the invitation, we got a list of questions. One of the first questions was, what do you see in terms of overlap between translation, museology, research, maybe also art? And I had to reflect on that. And one story came to mind where actually from my first experience with my teacher, there wasn't a whole lot of overlap, even with art. Yeah. One time, so we were in these traditional 3-year retreats, and he came to visit us, and he told us about a disciple who came to offer him a picture that she had painted herself to give as an offering to him. And then he said, well, not only you are grasping your thoughts, you are even putting them on paper. And so this was presented as kind of the opposite direction that we as meditators should go to. Yeah. And when he said that, then he was laughing. He had a very warm laugh. This, by the way, is the man I'm talking about, Lama Gendu Rinpoche. He himself said, this is a very grim picture of mine. I don't like this. I look so serious. So he was a very warm-hearted person. He could say very naked, harsh truths, but he said it with so much compassion and with a warm laughter that at least if you had confidence, you could accept it and work with it. So my direction came a little bit from this approach that the work as meditators is really away from creating art and preserving art, which is the job of museums. At the same time, the way I grew up was I always love museums. I still do. I go wherever I go to a new city, I go to museums. It gives me a feel for the culture of the people. And I also grew up producing lots of art and painting and sculpting and music and everything. And then I was confronted with this idea that there might be no meaning to it. Yeah. On the other hand, then if I look at what we did in the monastery, and you probably also did, we spent a lot of time creating torma. Sometimes, okay, they are offered, they are thrown out again. Torma are these beautiful objects. Some were for a long-term use. So they were made from clay and painted, and that is a form of art. Yeah, and we were also learning how to draw mandala. So the question, of course, arises as to what is meaningful in the production of art? What is meaningful in preserving art? What type of art should we engage in? In terms of translation, a similar question comes up. Yeah, there's a lot of debate about how a good translation should look like. And when I came to academia, there was a whole other world that opened up to translation. At first, as a practitioner, it is mostly about how, as a practitioner, you are inspired, touched. When you come to academia and the wording of the English doesn't correspond to the wording in the Tibetan or the Sanskrit, then it is dismissed as, not very high quality. Yeah. There is an interesting article that is called The Way of the Translator, and you recognize the title. The Way of the Bodhisattva is a translation of the Bodhicaya Avatara. So in this article, Luis Gomez, a translator himself, analyzes different translations of the Bodhicaya Avatara. And as Diane mentioned, I have recently been involved in the translation of not the root text, but a commentary of the Bodhicaya Avatara. I should disclose, I don't really identify as a translator because I know there are so many, even among the students, who are more qualified to translate because you're involved in all this philological study that I didn't do so much. The background, again, that I got from my teacher, when we talk in terms of overlap of areas, his overlap that he saw is between translation and contemplation. I started, or he started in France at a time. Okay, so he came from Tibet, Eastern Tibet, but was one of those who fled in 1959, spent many more years in retreat in India and Bhutan before he was sent by the Karmapa to France to build a monastery and a retreat center and teach Dharma to the Westerners. And so at that time, you can imagine there wasn't much around in terms of translation tools. We had a few dictionaries. He always taught everything in Tibetan and said, you have to understand from within by, as Lopinla mentioned, listening, contemplating, meditating. There will be a time when enough people have understood the Dharma from within, and then you can translate into your own languages. And the way he taught his first disciples to translate was not to be academically perfect, but to sit with the text and make sense of it. And actually, that is the way of translating that still works for me. And I know now if it is not fitting 100% with the original text. As an academic, you can make a footnote and explain that. But especially with songs of experience, poetry that are difficult to translate, I have made again and again the experience that sitting together, sitting with the text, that seems obscure at first, by contemplating it and applying it to all the knowledge of Dharma that came through the transmission that I received, it is like a magic process where meaning comes through. Often it has to be checked back to the original text or even the Sanskrit if there exists, like in the Bodhicaya Avatara. But it is a process in which I learned to trust. And that is also a creative process that is little bit like art, but different. There is joy in the process. All artists know that there is joy in the process. And there is the hope that the final result will be helpful for others who read it. But there's also the question sometimes, is this worth sharing? Is this really good enough? And you probably heard that also from many campus. They say, well, don't translate I don't know, Tantra Mahamudra text. This is so dangerous to spread something that is not correctly translated, that it is better to keep it for yourself as the process, but not as a product to share. So there now I will end here with my little bit random thoughts, but they all zoom into the question, what is worth preserving in terms of art, in terms of translation, and how do we go about creating the conditions for a production creation process that leads to, well, helpful results. Yeah. I don't know if this anything of that rings a bell to which you would like to respond.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, like as a traditional way. It's more often valued when I realize lamas and masters share their own instruction, like based on their disciples. Like still we like differentiate between like disciples in 3 levels, but still there are so many different angles and so many things that needs to be taught by masters. And like as the masters having so much wisdom and experience with this text itself, like they are like a living text itself. Like a living text do not exactly share their own experiences, but the master is a text who has embodied the experience and realization. Is so beautiful, and when we meet such masters.
Yeah, that is a beautiful way of saying it. The master is kind of the living text. Yeah. And before, when we were talking before this roundtable, I asked you about your experience with the artwork here, because having grown up in Nepal, you are surrounded by art. When you enter the temple, there are statues, there are tangas or paintings all around. Maybe you want to share with everybody what you told me. I thought that was very inspiring.
Yes, so from my experience, whenever I saw tangas of Buddha and other deities, it was so peaceful, like just glancing over these tangas and the way Buddha has stayed on meditate pose, it really makes one's mind in a very peaceful and also like there are certain like historical things we can also add, like in our tradition we say like when there are high realized masters make this kind of arts and statues, it's more like more connects more with the disciple. For me, it's like when I saw the Buddha statue at the old temple of our monastery, it was really I really felt something different in this statue, like our late old True Murche and other artists make it together, and it's really something connected to me. Also, like we have heard so many stories that like Manjushri, like the late teacher Mihar Murje, a great scholar from Nyingma tradition, had drawn the picture of Manjushri. Like it had 4 arms. Like I think it's also connected with the Manjushri, like from Jambal Senje. And it's really something, and we appreciate more in a traditional way. Like we appreciate tangas that are more like related with the high realized lamas and so on.
Yeah, and that is a very interesting point, yeah, because it would mean art that is produced by a realized master has another impact than even the most perfect artist who doesn't have realization could produce. I don't know if all of you agree. And by the way, this is a good moment where we could open the discussion, because here now we are talking about art that is really used for spiritual religious purposes. We learned about the museums that are homes to art that either have served like that in the past or still do, and you preserve it temporarily. I once heard from I think it was the National Museum in Delhi. They have Buddha relics, but they forbid that people do any kind of worship there, because it seems that people put down flowers and offerings and so on, and that becomes messy in the museum. So there is a tension between art that serves a spiritual purpose and art that is enjoyed for its beauty and its historical value. What are maybe your take on all that we said, or this particular question? Maybe we have.
Not a question, but a particular take, because currently I'm also researching on this very topic, and I have been invited to give a lecture on this related topic. And I brainstormed with some of my other colleagues for the topic of my lecture, and then finally came up with, I think it sounds very catchy, between museums and the sacred. So that is something that I've been researching on, because as you mentioned, so initially museums were made with collections of objects, and they were detached from the purpose that they were meant for. But right now, what we can see in many museums, and especially in my recent visit to many museums in America, I saw at least one or two of the objects, Asian objects, um, being decorated with flowers or some money being offered. And actually, in the National Museum, when I visited in 2019 in Delhi, while I was just walking through the galleries, I saw lots of shoes outside one gallery, and I was like, "What happened?" Suddenly, you see all art objects, and then you see shoes. And then when I went inside, it was the gallery with the relic from Thailand, and there were devotees sitting all around and meditating. So, so I think in museums now we have to come up with new ways of studying how museums um, are adding, or how the devotees are adding the religious context or the context for which the objects were created back into the objects which were devoid of those contexts when they were placed in museums. So this is a very important research, I think, that we can all think about, especially museologists and art historians.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I feel weird sitting so far in the back. Sostia just reminded me of something. You spent time at the Rubin Museum, right? As a fellow. I don't know if the shrine room was still there as a an exhibition, but I went to the Rubin Museum with three Nepali friends. One was a mugger and the others were Mustangis, Loba. And as they got there, the first thing they did was kick off their shoes and do triple prostration in a museum exhibition. What was most striking was the reaction of all the other Americans or whoever they were, European tourists, standing around and just dumbfounded by this, and you could see it had a very, very profound impact watching this static exhibition come to life, and really be a focus of prayer and, and devotion.
Yeah, it was a very beautiful installation, the altar room. And when I was there in 2023, it was not only the local Tibetan community and Asians, but even Westerners were sitting there and meditating. But unfortunately, Rubin Museum has closed. So, but then the altar, I believe, has been relocated to somewhere in Boston, I think. I'm not particularly sure where, but I know that it has been relocated finally. And besides offering flowers and money, and that was another way of how museums are creating the sacred space. And I would like maybe rephrase it, preserving the sacred space nowadays, rather than detaching the cultural context of the objects.
And it might be connecting also to the topic of translation, which mostly deals with text, and that was originally the topic of our roundtable. Bringing to life the texts that are in the archives, that you mentioned, I think is equally important. And I think we have a beautiful example of how that can be done with the 84,000 translating the word of the Buddha, which is this project that you probably all know, initiated by Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche, translating the entire Kangyo, word of the Buddha, where traditionally the Tibetans, I think, were not even reading some of the Kangyo sutras, but the Kangyo was kept as a object of worship in the monasteries. And so through when the translation was started, there were even critical voices who said, what is the point of it? But now that it is coming closer to a completion of the translation, a lot of activities around those texts have sparked. Chökyi Nyima Rinpoche also is part of those masters who see the value of bringing people together and reading and reciting these texts that were before kind of a dead object. And through the recitation and through the living experience that comes with it, I would argue that even texts that were relatively dead can be brought back to life. Of course, the Kangyo was never dead because it was always transmitted in terms of these transmissions. I don't know what you would say about bringing texts to life that right now exist only in an archive and maybe do not have a living tradition. I don't really know which text you have there. Is it possible to revive through translation, old texts?
Yes, I was really excited when I heard like 700 archives, Tibetan archives,
7 lakh.
7 lakh.
7,000, ne? 700,000. Okay.
Yeah, I was really like amazed with like so many texts that are lost during different situations where it can be found again. Like, and it's really very inspiring if we could contribute to flourish this type of archives, bring back again into learning. And like there in recent times, like there were so many high masters, high realized lamas, they lost their original text in Tibet, but later when they found like there was a 13 text group of texts, like it's Sungbum from the Khenze's teacher or something. He admired this text so much, but it was lost in Tibet somewhere. And later on, when he found, and he was so delighted with the text, and it's like Seshin Gasap Sungum, like these are 13 or maybe more. And it's really like he was the teacher, Khenze, late Khenze Rinpoche was so delighted, and he like prostrated many times, and he was so like that like sometimes if we can find the old text, like then it will be very good thing.
Maybe a delegation of Kempos and Lopens from here should investigate which texts are there.
Definitely.
I think you can just leave on all the time. That'll be amazing.
I think it's a pleasure for us if you make a visit at Patna Museum and look at those manuscripts, because I am not a monk, I am not from a Buddhist tradition, but as a human being, and I am working in a museum, it's a responsibility of all museum professional. The things which is for a particular community or for a particular religious being must be available for those people. They know how to use those texts betterly, and we are open, we are ready for it. I don't know how we use it, who are going to read it, who are not going to read it, but at least we have to take step. When Buddha was becoming Buddha, he was not aware who will be their followers, but he did that, he did took that step. So same as we have to do the things, I don't know who will be the beneficiaries, but uh, like it's my positive thought that somehow it will benefit human being, Buddhist or non-Buddhist people. So if we translate those texts in a small story for a layman, again it will be very beneficial, because lot of different communities, lot of different people visit our museum. So if we interpret that text in a different aspect, that will be beneficial, apart from translating it word to word for a monks or for the researcher. So we have to work in a broader way. That text must be understood by researchers and the monk and the higher level master, but also for people like me. And I want to here bring a small story. I recently joined a short-term course here. I never aware about the Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist teaching, Buddha's teaching. And I am glad, thank you for this institution. Because of this, I am able to somehow get the idea about what the Buddha's teaching is and how beneficial it is. So it's a change.
Thank you. Swati, by the way, is talking about our online course, the Bodhicharya Avatara, where one of Lopunla's colleagues is teaching in the Tibetan language, and there is a translator who translates but also gives explanations. And we are offering this course every year here on campus, but it also exists now as an online course that can be taken in a self-paced way anywhere in the world. Little advertisement.
As I mentioned in my presentation, when the definition of museum and how it is evolving, the latest definition after almost 20 years of staying static from 2007 till 2022, the last definition definitely mentions the involvement of the local community or the community of origin, as the technical term says. So I think Swati is very correct in saying, in welcoming the monks to Patna Museum.
Yeah, we are really grateful that like so many like archives and museums are preserving these manuscripts. And, like also in our tradition itself, like we value this Indian commentaries a lot. Like we try to relate our Tibetan commentaries with like in Indian commentaries. If it's related with them, then it's Tibetan commentaries are valued more and more authentic. So like in the past, there were so many Indian scholars and Tibetan scholars who worked together to like make Buddhism flourish in Tibet, and it was really the place where we learned so many things, and it's really appreciate, like we appreciate a lot that all these different departments are working together as a community to preserve Buddhism, and I really appreciate. Like also, I haven't been to Patna Museum, but I have been to Bihar Museum. Like not Bihar Museum, I'm not sure. Like it's nearby Bodh Gaya.
Different museum there.
Yeah.
Not
No.
in Patna.
Yeah, when I saw like old statues, it's like just I can remind of the stories, what might have been, and different mudras. It's always so blessing. It's still like I feel so devoted whenever I visit these museums and see different old statues. Yeah. Thank you.
Lopanla, when you were speaking about the role of tradition and the relationship with the teacher, I was reminded of something I had to reflect on often. As you probably know, I'm a Catholic priest, meaning I had to study a lot of Christian theology and scripture for many years. And we always speak about a kind of triumvirate or a triangle of three things. And that's the scripture, the source, the tradition through which it's interpreted, and then authority, which would correspond, I think, to the teacher, because you say the tradition is always growing. There's always new interpretation. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any work. We could just show movies of people speaking for the rest of time. But what always struck me as interesting is the relationship between the dynamic and kind of creative tension between authority, the people who have the right to interpret, and the tradition itself. How do we interpret the scripture? What is the meaning in modern times, for example? How does it respond to the current human situation? So the interplay of those three is very parallel to much of what you were speaking about.
Yes, sir. Like Buddha himself also told that in future, like different traditional backgrounds and different modern changes would shape Buddhism in a different ways. It won't be always the same that it is, but it's still like we need to preserve the core meaning and the appearance of the way Buddhism is practiced in different world. It's still valuable if it's relates to the core meaning. Yeah. So the main thing that was implied by Buddha was to stick to the core meaning.
So we're coming to the end of this session. There is one more. Then, okay, go for it.
I just wanted to talk on what Julia had mentioned about texts and their living traditions. Like there is the Ashtasahasrika Pragyaparamita in the Hiranyavarna Mahavihar, which is popularly known as the Golden Temple. It is read annually once a year. And when it is not read, then because there's only a particular time of the year that it is read, then it is packed and people worship the text. And once in 5 years, the golden letters are rewritten So they have to choose a time when it is not supposed to be read, because of the lunar calendar, in which they don't read it for about 2 months, and then all the golden alphabets are retouched with real gold. And this is a practice that has been continuing for so many years. I think the last time it was touched was probably 3 years ago. So probably next year or the following year, it will be rewritten. And I think, yeah, you can take your students from here. It will be a wonderful visit.
Yes, I think many of us have visited that text also already. And I'm sure also this, what you just mentioned, relates to Namila's research, because you were also telling us about the living tradition and the worship aspect of the text and the images. Maybe, I don't know, sorry, go a little bit over time. Maybe you can tell us what you found out, what priests told you about their relationship, also particularly to the depictions of Manjushri in the Namasamgiti, or about more generally worshipping the whole text as Manjushri.
For the hello,
Yeah,
hello,
very
can you
close.
hello?
Or maybe you take this one here. I don't know.
This one works better.
So the manuscript itself, I actually did not get access to the actual manuscripts that's in the Baha. I used the ones that are already out there. But when I talked to a priest about the worship, I don't know. Let me think for a second now. Your question was how? Can you repeat your question? Is that
how the priests relate to the text, and maybe more specifically to the images, the artwork in the text, in terms of maybe worship, or knowing exactly what the hand elements are that you are researching. In which way do they talk about the art and the manuscript?
Oh yeah, so you know, during the research process, I went to Namasamgiti festival that happened during Patan. So when I went to the festival, I noticed that everyone had this. They were chanting throughout the procession. Had the book with them, and there was this image of the same image that was also in the manuscript. You know, so it was also carried around. So it's really out there, and people are really. I also see it in different monasteries. But then when I asked them how do you relate to it, they actually said that it's the combination of 5 Buddhas and Manjushri. So that's like a common narrative, and that's what the priests told me as well. And they told me that it's actually for us to understand the text better. It's like a technique. It's like a that's the point of Vajrayana, right? Through it's like a technique. Yeah, it's a skillful means to sort of help people understand the text better. So that's what is a common narrative, and that's what the priest told me as well. But with the particular image of the 12-armed deity, Naresh Mangurju, who is also initiated, he actually told me that it's actually the exoteric form. The esoteric form is still not out there. So this is what we are seeing. It's like the exoteric form. Of course, it has a function, but to see the esoteric form, you still need to be initiated, and all that procession is there. But obviously, this image is also very widespread and very well worshipped, I think.
Thanks. I really hate to cut it here because we're starting to get into good things, but we need to go eat before we come back at 2. At 2 o'clock, there will be another session specifically on research with Joe LaRose, our language program director, and also with Maria Vasilieva, who will be online from Kiev, talking about research in manuscripts, research in translation, and also Father Greg will intervene in that. Yeah. Informally. And then just keep in mind this conversation will continue tomorrow. I've invited Abhishek to help me organize tomorrow to bring you young people who are actually working or thinking about how their heritage here in Nepal is going to transfer into the next generation, right? So please keep that in mind. I think it's going to be very interesting. We have one student who studied here, Birat, who will be here, and two other, Mina Lama and Sojan Prajapati. Great. So please keep that in mind. But for now, I invite speakers to come with me, and all of you, we gather back at 2:00 right here. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to newcomers. I'm very happy that we're continuing this conversation that is, I think, important for a future of research at RYI. Important also in getting access to texts that we need for our research. And our next speaker, Maria, will be speaking from Kiev, and she will be online. And she will talk specifically about her experience as a researcher and working with archives material. So yours, would you present a little bit more yourself better than I
Yes,
did?
sure. Thank you, Diane. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share a little bit my opinion and experience on manuscript work. And today I would like to emphasize importance of manuscripts for Tibetan textual studies. My name is Maria Vasilyeva. I'm originally from Ukraine, and I teach at RY textual studies translation mostly. Yeah, so this is what interests me more. So within Buddhist studies, textual studies, textual criticism, manuscript work, and of course Tibetan Sanskrit translation. And when I hear about manuscripts and that there are some manuscript collections which are made available, this is what causes me a lot of joy, because for us, manuscripts are indispensable. The problem is that we are here in like this Tibetan Buddhist studies. We are not in Tibet, obviously, and we do not have access to those manuscript collections which are still there in Tibet, because unfortunately, those manuscript collections, many of them, of course, were destroyed, but those which were preserved, we do not have access to them, because for the Republic of China, manuscript work is a matter of national pride, and they only want Chinese nationals to work with those manuscripts, which are still there in Tibet, although they were withdrawn from Tibet, taken away, for example, to Beijing, to the Tibet Research Center. So that's why, like, since we don't have access to those collections, any other manuscript collections which have been found and made available anywhere in the world, this is really a very joyful opportunity to access those texts in the form which predates the Kangyur editions. But this said, we need to take into consideration that not all manuscripts have equal value, because some manuscripts are just copies made from the canonical collections, so like Kangyur or Tengyur texts. This is, for example, my experience with manuscripts which are made available in the National Library of Bhutan in Thimphu. So all these manuscripts that I have tried to evaluate, most of them were just copies of Nartang Kangyur. So since Nartang Kangyur is already available and digitalized, like those manuscripts unfortunately do not constitute much value for the textual studies research. However, if there are any manuscripts which predate Kangyur editions, those are of the most important and most valuable. And among all the Tibetan manuscript collections, of course, Dunhuan manuscripts are the most important, because they date to 10th, 11th century, and they predate Kangyur editions, which are all dated to the 18th century to at least 7th century. So like they're at least 7 centuries earlier than all the available Kangyur and Tengyur editorial collections, editions. So this is of the most importance for us as textual studies scholars, because this is what shows us the history of the text and that unedited form of the text. Because of course the thing is that with editorial collections, they were heavily edited and changes were introduced to those texts, and then those the changes are not attested. So that's why, like, for us, like, to know what is the actual original form of the text, like original translation of the text, we cannot decide on this when we look at the editions, like Kangyur or Tengyur editions. So that's why, like, in order to establish what is the earliest form or what was the actual translated form of the text, we need to look for manuscripts. And in the recent past, I would say, like, even like 50 years ago, manuscript work and textual criticism work was an indispensable part of the translation work. So before anyone was ready to translate a text, they had to establish critical edition of this text, collect all the witnesses, compare all the witnesses, and only after that establish critical edition. And then translation was the translation of this established critical edition. So it was very rare when, you know, someone would just take one version of the text and just translate it and make it available, which this is what we see now. So it's very common that now, like, translator just gets one copy of the text without any textual criticism work, without any comparison with other witnesses. They just translate this one version, and even such important translation projects like 84,000 project, which translates the word of the Buddha, which means they want to translate Kangyur, and then after this also translate Tengyur. The translators who work for this project, they're not required to look for manuscripts or to consult any manuscripts available. So the requirement is just Derge Kangyur and then Pedurma comparative Kangyur edition. And also they are required to verify it with one independent Kangyur, for example, Tok Palace Kangyur. That's it. Yeah. So basically, even if there is a Dunhuan manuscript of the text there translated, this is up to them. Yeah. So if they are actually diligent in the textual criticism work, then they will look for this manuscript and do the comparative work. If not, they will not even look for it. So it's not uncommon when I look at the translations which are made available within the 84,000 project that manuscripts are not even attested in the introduction to these translations, because basically translators just don't think it's necessary to bother to check whether those manuscripts are available. And this is a great pity, because you know, anytime I see a translation and whenever I discuss translation with our students at RY, I always ask them, but what exactly do you intend to translate? Because there is lack of awareness in my experience of this whole history of textual transmission, manufacturing, editions, etc., etc. So, and it's very common when even our students of the translation MA program, they just take the most readable and easily accessible version of the text. Usually, this is the most modern version, because now in many Tibetan monasteries, there are already those editorial commissions and printing houses where they just prepare these modern editions and they publish them nicely in nice books and make them available. However, we cannot consider those modern editions scholarly editions per se, because there is no critical apparatus, there is no attestation about changes which were introduced into those texts, why those changes were made, etc. Right? But they look very nice. These are modern, easily readable editions, easily readable books, and this is what attracts us, attracts our students, first of all, because they don't have time and don't want to sit there with old texts, even with old Kangyur texts like Nartang often is very difficult to read. It's like eye breaking, and basically they don't have time. So they just pick up the most recent and nice edition, and they just intend to translate that. And then I ask them, but why do you pick up this most recent edition of the text? Well, there are probably many more witnesses to this text which are more older than this one. So you cannot just pick up a recent text and just translate this text and then claim that I have translated a text, because without textual criticism, the value of such translation will be much less. So this is like this constant struggle and this constant like strive to make students aware that textual criticism work is indispensable part of translation work. That it's not just enough to pick up a recent text and translate the most recent edition. They need to do all the background work, look for all the witnesses, compare all the witnesses, establish edition, and only then do the translation. And then what is the translation? Translation is of this critical edition. So yeah, that's why whenever manuscripts are made available, it's just a big joy for me. Of course, I have no idea what are those manuscripts identified there in the Patna Museum collection. I really hope you guys will have something which predates Kangyur and Tengyur collections, because if you have manuscripts which are just copies of those Kangyur and Tengyur collections, then of course their value will be much less. So let's hope that you will have something interesting there, and then you will be able to identify those manuscripts well and also find money to digitalize them. Because you see, like, it's very difficult to travel physically and access manuscripts physically. So if the high resolution digitalized collection is being available, then this is what simplifies our life a lot. And even within this field of Dunhuan manuscript studies, those collections which are digitalized, those collections are used. And among all of them, only 2 collections are digitalized. The one in London Museum, British Museum in London, Stein collection, and also Pelliot collection in the National Library of France. So these 2 collections are digitalized and made available. But that's not all, right? We also have Dunhuan manuscripts in St. Petersburg in Russia. Also, we have Dunhuan manuscripts in China and in Japan, but these parts of Dunhuan collection are not digitalized. So then, we cannot access them. We don't know what is there. And this is a great pity, because if you know a little bit how Dunhuan manuscripts were taken from Dunhuan, that Stein, who came first, he didn't even read Tibetan. So he took whatever looked nice to him. And Pelliot came after him. Pelliot could read Tibetan, but he just took leftovers. And Russians came and then took what was left, and then Japanese, and then only Chinese. They tried to preserve which was left after all those first collectors who came and bought these manuscripts, probably for very little, if not nothing. So then you see, like, Dunhuan collections are so that often manuscripts are broken between several collections, like divided between several collections, because as I just said, those who took them from Dunhuan, they had no idea what they were taking. So it's not uncommon to have like half of manuscripts in London, half of manuscript in Paris, and then something missing, and that what is missing could be somewhere else, let's say in St. Petersburg or somewhere in Japan or probably in China, but we cannot access it because these collections are not digitalized. So that's why I really hope that you will find sponsorship to digitalize Patna manuscript collection and also produce a good quality catalog, which will actually identify texts, provide the opening and colophon for this text, so that this catalog can actually serve of manuscript research and facilitate manuscript identification. And then, of course, if you have something independent, yes, something which is not directly copied from Kangyur and Tengyur, that this would be the most important, because then we can get an independent version of the text, which is not attested anywhere, probably, and then we can compare it with what we have already available. And this will serve a great purpose for the textual manuscript studies. So that's why I really hope that you will complete this work fast and make this Patna collection available also digitally. Yeah, so this is like a little bit of the overview of my perspective of manuscript studies in Tibetan textual studies, and the expression of my hopes and aspiration for the future of Patna Museum collection. And yeah, so now if you have any questions, then please, I'll be happy to answer them.
So we'll follow with a few questions if possible, or comments. And after that, our friend Joe here will continue with a presentation with his own research recently. Anyone would like to ask a question or say a comment on Maria? Perhaps we could have your voice. Swatiji?
Manuscripts are already digitalized. Hello.
Uh,
My name is Swati Singh and I worked at Patna Museum. I am a curatorial associate there. The thing is that what information I got, that Patna Museum manuscript is documented but
mhm,
not translated. Only
mhm,
titles are translated but not the text. And again, we are not able to, with that title translation, we are not able to get the whole idea about the manuscript. And then it's not useful for us to bring that narration, bring that perspective of history for our visitors. So yes, for translation is important for us. On basis of that, we develop furthermore things which help our community with whom our museum indulge.
mhm.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, but like at least because Professor Diane told me that now you will start this new cataloging work. Yes, so when you catalog manuscripts, then what I would recommend, do not just include titles. Yeah, because the thing with titles are often changed, and you see, so just to have a title doesn't help much. Yeah, for example, Shastra can be called a sutra. It's not uncommon, right? So it's very difficult to identify something by title. But if you at least include, like, title Tibetan, if there is also Sanskrit title, then Sanskrit, and then opening of this text and the colophon, what comes in the end. Yeah, so basically, who is the translator, who is the author? This would be very helpful. Yeah, so just to provide more information. If you like, I can share with you catalogs of the Dunhuan collection. So the one in Paris was created by a great French scholar, Marcel Laloux, in 1939, uh, just before the Second World War. And the one in London by the great Belgian scholar Lavalier-Poussin. So those catalogs, they contain much more information than just the title. Yeah. So, for example, of course, both of these scholars were great Tibetologists of the time, and they could also provide information about what is quoted in those texts. For example, so they were actually reading them, because it's not that they were translating all of them, but the information they provide is complete. Also, all the physical dimensions of those manuscripts, like script, paper, all of it. Yeah. And even often I could see that they were including something like, oh, on such folio, this text is being quoted, like a sutra like this being quoted, etc. It's also very helpful. Yeah. So it helps with the text identification and tracing. And also they had access to Peking Kangyur and Tengyur, which were already there in the National Library of France at the time. So they could also try to trace those texts to these Kangyur catalogs, which were already there at the time when they worked on Dunhuang collection. It's not that they always could trace it, because it was this pre-digital time, so I cannot imagine how they managed, to this 280 something pages in Kangyur, manually to work with all of it and try to trace those manuscripts to the Kangyur text. But still, they're amazing work. So those catalogs, they are much more than just, a title. So this is what I would ask you, if possible, when you establish your catalogs, new catalog in Patna, that you include as much information in the description of this text as possible. And so then it would be easier for us to find those texts when we look for them. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Maria. My question is actually for Swati, but you might be interested, Maria, in the reply. What do we know about I may have missed this in your talk. What is the provenance? What's the source of all these manuscripts? And is it a single collector, or is it a series of collections created over a long period of time, or is it one individual's lifelong collection?
The collection which we have at Patna Museum was bought by Mahapandit Rahul Sanskritayan, and he was a collector. He was a Mahapandit. He was a scholar in early 19th century, and he bought that collection from Tibetan region. So and he donated entire his collection to Patna Museum. And as Monk already shared this information, when Nalanda was burnt, so in Bihar, we don't have the authentic Buddhist manuscript, but whatever written in the Tibetan manuscript was taken from the Bihar only. So we are retracing our heritage through Tibet. And we are not able to read that script, we are not able to understand the things, but we are actually retracing ourselves through the Tibetan text. So that's why translation is very important for us.
I'd like to add something to this. In that collection, there are paper like manuscripts, but there are also glass slides. And on the glass slides, there are Sanskrit manuscripts that seemed very special because they might cover some of the ground that we're missing in the Tibetan collection. So I don't know if you want to add something to this, Maria.
I mean, of course, I just spoke a little bit about Tibetan manuscripts, but Sanskrit manuscripts are probably even more important for us than Tibetan manuscripts. And our knowledge of Sanskrit manuscripts surviving in Tibet are very fragmentary. We know about Potala collection, about Norbolinka collection, Samye collection, that actually those collections were not destroyed and probably partly destroyed. But I know that there are boxes and boxes, hundreds of boxes of those Sanskrit manuscripts taken from these monasteries, which are now kept in Beijing in this Tibetan Research Center. For example, the manuscript I'm particularly interested in, this is a Tika, a commentary on the Bhadracharya Pranidhana. It is in the box 156. But this is it. This is all I know, because there was one Chinese scholar who collaborated with a Japanese scholar, and this Japanese scholar made this information available, but there's no catalog of those texts. There's no description of those texts, and Chinese don't let anyone from the West to access them. Yeah, only Japanese scholars who are rich and smart, they make translation teams in which they include Chinese scholars who actually do nothing. They're just there for the name, and then they get access to these manuscripts, and then they can establish critical editions, but they cannot make the actual manuscripts available. So for example, even if I know that particular Japanese scholar has the manuscript I'm interested in, he cannot give it to me, just give any photocopy to me or anything. So basically, I just need to sit and hope that sooner or later he will publish critical edition of this text. But how many years it will take? Yeah, 5, 10, I don't know. Yeah, so that's why, of course, like Sanskrit manuscripts is a must. And this is the way how I like to discourage people who work for 84,000 and pretend that, they just translate those texts, canonical texts from Tibetan, and that will be it. I always tell them and tease them, yeah, that as soon as Sanskrit, a manuscript of the text you're working on, translated from Tibetan, is identified and made available, you will have to retranslate the whole thing. Because, Tibetan is very vague, Tibetan is very imprecise in comparison with Sanskrit, which is much more precise. In Tibetan, we cannot even tell apart an adjective and nominalized verb. Yeah. So basically, Tibetan is very imprecise in comparison with Sanskrit. So that's why, of course, Sanskrit manuscripts are likewise very important. But as I already said, everything depends on the quality of the manuscript, because in Nepal, in the National Archives, there are many, many Sanskrit manuscripts, but often these are just copies and copies and copies of the most popular Buddhist texts, like Prajnaparamita Sutras, like Bhadracharya Pranidhana has 150 something manuscripts, but these are just copies produced for the sake of merit accumulation. So they have tons of mistakes and they do not constitute much value from the perspective of textual criticism. So basically, I'm really curious to find out what exactly do you have. So which Sanskrit manuscripts, which Tibetan manuscripts. So that's why I hope that you will soon have some, proper way to explain what is this collection about, and are those manuscripts are just copies of Kangyur and Tengyur, or this is something else. Yeah, so for me, as a textual scholar, this is the main question. So what are they? Yeah, because if you just say 19th century, they are just copies of 18th century Kangyurs and Tengyur editions. Yeah, okay, cool, but this doesn't really mean much. Yeah, but if you tell me that this is something which we never seen before, because in Tibet there's so many texts. Like once I was lucky to get into Sakya Monastery Library in Sakya in Tibet. They were they're like texts from ground to the ceilings, like patches, 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 and patches. But we were not allowed even, to have a close look. Forget about taking any text and just opening the text. Yeah, so I could just look at them, yeah, but I could never touch them even. So can you imagine which treasures are there? Those texts which we now consider unavailable. Yeah, and they could be actually available there. So if you could present something like this for the world, it would be amazing. So I really anticipate what you're there to find in your Patna Museum collection. And good luck with all this work you do. It's really very, very important for the whole Tibetan textual studies world, and of course Sanskrit studies world as well.
Thank you, Maria. We will shift now to Joe's presentation. I think, Joe, you can share from your screen because you're on Zoom. Yeah, the PowerPoint, you share it on Zoom and you don't need to hook up on the line there. Yeah, we did that this morning. So just try to share and we'll make you co-host.
So a little bit about me. My name is, as you can see, Joseph LaRose. I started out as an English lit major and did a BA and MA in English literature. While I was doing my BA in Canada, I happened to start taking Sanskrit, and subsequent to my BA and MA in English literature, did an MA in religious studies and kept doing Sanskrit. And now I continue to do Sanskrit as a PhD in progress person. Not done yet. Soon. And I also, at this point, I started teaching Sanskrit in 2009 in Canada, And then I started teaching at RYI since 2014. So some time already. My main interests, Buddhist narrative literature in Sanskrit, Buddhist narrative genres, Avadanas, Jatakas, Buddha biography. I haven't done a PowerPoint slide presentation in a while, so hopefully it works. So I'll just give you a little bit of an idea of what I work on primarily. My PhD project is a edition, translation, and study of a Buddhist Vinaya text from the Gilgit manuscripts. The Gilgit manuscripts came out of the ground in northern Pakistan in the 1930s and contributed greatly to our understanding of Sanskrit Indian Buddhism. What else? For my work, I mean, I'm mainly a philologist, and commenting a little bit on what Maria said, I agree entirely with Maria when it comes to working with Sanskrit materials, that if you cannot go back to the manuscript, then your work will suffer because of that. The editions, the published editions of especially Buddhist Sanskrit texts that were produced through the 20th century tend to be very unreliable. And so there is a published edition of this text. The Gilgit manuscripts were edited by someone named Dutt in the 1930s and 40s, and he published several volumes of his editions. They're so full of mistakes. Not to fault Dutt. Dutt had he had a limited amount of time to work with the materials, and he had a lot of ground to cover. And so inevitably a lot of mistakes were made, and to then base your work on flawed additions really does detract from the quality of the work. Now, what Maria said about critical editions, of course, critical editions are very important. I'm fortunate in the sense that the Gilgit manuscripts provides a unique Sanskrit witness to the text that I work on. So for my work, I'm not making a diplomatic edition, so I'm not making a critical edition, I'm making a diplomatic edition and working from there. This is the Gilgit manuscripts, they're generally in very good shape, the parts that survive. This is a zoom in. Luckily for me, again, talking about or commenting on what Maria said, the Gilgit manuscripts were published in facsimile edition, so there was always a facsimile edition to which you could compare the poor edited edition. But recently a new facsimile edition came out. The manuscripts in the National Archives of India were rephotographed, and new facsimile editions are coming out of all of the Gilgit manuscripts that are held in the National Archives of India. So it's very, very nice to work with. When Maria was talking about you also were talking about Sankratyayana's work. So when I spent more time as a graduate student and less time as a teacher, then I had the pleasure in Canada of working with some of the images that Sankratyayana made, right? And so this is often the case when you're working with manuscripts, right? These are palm leaf manuscripts that were thumbtacked to the door by the 1,000 and photographed in the 1930s by Sankratyayana. You can see all of the thumbtack holes on the side. They were just tacking up 5 or 6, taking a picture, flipping them, taking a picture, 5 or 6 more went up. Thumbtack covers part of the manuscript, what to do. And this is all you have to work with, right? That they're all out of order. You know, when they're tacking them at the door, it's not like they're being careful to put them in order. But it's actually wonderful work. From my point of view, this is, I don't know, perhaps my favorite thing to do. So I just grabbed this when Maria was mentioning the work of when Swati was talking about the work of Sankrityayana. Yes, he saved, right? Who knows where this is now, right? This was photographed in Tibet, tacked to a door. It's probably dust on the floor somewhere now, right? So he did immense work in the preservation of manuscripts. I'm not here to talk to you actually about my research. I've said more already than I wanted to about the research that I do. Instead, I wanted to talk and show you pictures of a place for potential research. Wonderful place. And so early 2025, I had the opportunity to join the Wooden Fish Waksa, what is it called? International Seminar on Gandharam Buddhism. And so for about 10 days in January of 2025, me and about 30 other international participants and a few scholars and of course local hosts traveled, spent time together, visited sites in Gandhara, starting off in Islamabad, going from Islamabad to Takshila, from Takshila to Peshawar, from Peshawar to Swat Valley, and then from Swat Valley back to Peshawar. This was, of course, for people who are art historians, archaeologists, I suppose museologists, epigraphists. This was just really a great opportunity. I came along because of I was accepted into the program because of my work on the Gilgit manuscripts. So I'm sure everyone in the room, I would hope everyone in the room has some idea of what Gandhara means to the history of Buddhism in the subcontinent, right? For about 1,000 years, it was one of the major centers of Buddhism at the major crossroad of the Silk Road, where the East-West Silk Road met the southern juncture into the subcontinent. And so there survive hundreds and hundreds of archaeological sites, thousands and thousands of pieces of art, thousands of inscriptions. And so the rest, I have about, I don't know how many slides, maybe 20 slides of pictures of some of the different places we went to and some of the things we did. I mean, some notes, so I don't want to forget something important. I think that's okay. So again, just I have hundreds of pictures. Last night after the wonderful performances we had, I sat in my office and picked a few to give you an idea of some of the things we saw and how much there is to see. Jalian Monastery, where you have the monastery complexes here have a very typical layout where they have a stupa. The stupa, they have a main stupa of decent size, not as big as Swayambhu, smaller than Swayambhu, maybe half the size of Swayambhu, maybe a bit smaller, surrounded by many votive stupas. And then somewhere in the vicinity, maybe 100 meters away, 150 meters away, is a monastery, always, more or less always quadrangular, right? A four-sided monastery with the cells on the outside and a pool in the middle, right? These, of course, are now all ruins, but so this is a votive stupa from Jalian Monastery. In most cases, the domes of the larger stupas don't survive, but there's a lot of stucco art. Again, a seated Buddha. Here's what's left of the stupa at another monastery, Mohra Moradu Monastery and Stupa. The domes were more or less all plundered, right? Excavated, if you prefer. And then here we see a sort of typical monastery layout with the cells around the outside. And I don't know how well you can see, but the square in the middle there's about a 1 foot or 30 centimeter depression, which would have had water. Dharmarajika Stupa, which is the Dharmarajika referred to here as Ashoka. Right, this is a stupa that, according to tradition, was sponsored by Ashoka. Wonderful site. The city of Takshashila. Here's a picture of the a plaque, so you can see the size of it. It's the excavated parts are approximately 1 kilometer by a half a kilometer, and there's more. They point to more over there. We have to excavate there. More over there. We have to excavate there. Right? Ashokan rock edicts. Taktibai Monastery and Stupa. Such a large complex on the top of a hill. Beautiful. If I could play the panorama, from left to right. On the left side of the hill, there's more monastery. On the right side of the hill, there's more monastery. This one was, it had a kind of basement with dark cells for meditation, right? Yeah, it was super cool. It was like going into catacombs. Amazing. And here you can see in the middle, this small square in the middle is where the stupa would have been, right? The dome of the stupa. Swat Valley, just a kind of view of the Swat Valley. Shingardara Stupa, in the middle of the neighborhood. Jahanabad Buddha, rock carved Buddha, with a friend there for scale. And I took this picture because, as I said earlier, usually the stupas, the other sites, were then accompanied by these typical monasteries. And so we had to climb this hill to get to this rock cut Buddha, which was kind of high up on a hill. And we had gone other places on the hill and seen some inscriptions carved into rock faces. And then on the way down, this is Elisa Lori. She's one of the heads of the Italian archaeological mission in Pakistan. She pointed out that, this is the wall of, if we excavated here, this is where we would find the monastery, right? But it's on private property. So there's a whole farm built on, there's a farm. We walked around this farm to get to the rock cut Buddha. And then she said, here's the monastery, right? So that they have literally so many sites that they haven't even started excavating, right? It's really striking. This is Bhutkara 1 Monastery and Stupa. So I don't know, in the sort of middle of the picture, you can kind of see where the dome of the stupa would have been. Again, not so large, but in the middle of the complex, surrounded by these small commemorative stupas. And then again, just off to the one side is where you have then the remains of the monastery. Here we could, this is what's left of the dome of the stupa. And when you sort of climb around on the dome of the stupa, you can see that the stupa started out as something much smaller, right? This curved rock wall in the middle, and then it was added to again, and then it was added to a third time to produce the final form of the stupa. Amlukdara Monastery and Stupa, this one in the countryside of the Swat Valley. Here you can see in the kind of dirt walls, again, the parts that are lower are parts that have been excavated. And so all of this sort of flatter land to the right side of the stupa, this will all eventually get excavated, right? You can almost see on the near side of the stupa, there's these sort of flat rocks. They had these very large, flat, round rocks that would have been the chatras on the top of the stupas. We were always seeing these large discs. You'll see one better in a future picture. Tokardara Monastery and Stupa, also under excavation. And then here too, I think the next picture shows you, right? This is, when we arrived at Tokardara, much of what we saw just a couple months earlier was still, this still would have all been underground, right? So very active excavation. And so this is what I'm partly what I was talking about. These round circles, the domes of the stupas would have all had these chatras, and they're finding, here's a stucco Buddha just come out of the ground with a tiny hint. I don't know how well you can see it, a tiny hint of color still on it, right? Some pigment. So those were the archaeological sites. And then we visited museums, of course. Takshila Museum, Peshawar Museum. Takshila Museum, 1918 it was founded. Peshawar Museum, 1907. So this is all from the colonial period. This started out as a dance hall. No, and then they have these Buddhist statues on the sides that they polish them all up, right? So they're all shiny black. What to do? Swat Museum. This one is later. This one was mostly founded with the help of the Italian archaeological mission. And then, so of course, inside the museums, once you're done visiting archaeological sites, then the museums have thousands of pieces of local art. Very typical Gandharan art. The Peshawar, the curator of the Peshawar Museum said that they have 10,000 pieces on display out of a collection of 40,000, right? Yeah. It really is. So there's all sorts of because the Gandharan art tends to be, sometimes it's larger, but it tends to be not so large. But then they also have these large Buddha statues, right? I'm also curious from a museological point of view, because of course these are products of, I'm not sure what the state of museology is in Pakistan. I really have no idea. I found it from a patron of the museum. All of the statues had, you can see harsh lights pointing straight up the face of the statues, right? and inside the glass cases. So everything else was behind glass. So there was all sorts of reflections. And then all of those pieces had really bright lights pointing straight down from the top of the cabinet. So it was, I think their museums probably need some updating. And then, that was the end of our sort of museum trips. Takshila, Peshawar, and Swat Museum. But then just in terms of activity on the academic study of Buddhism, let's say, that's going on in Pakistan right now, we were in part hosted by the Takshila Institute for Archaeology and Civilizations at Quaid Al-Azam University in Islamabad, where they have undergraduate, they have BA, MA, PhD students working on archaeology, a lot of it Buddhist archaeology. These pictures, the next two pictures, this picture I included because, as I said, part of the way I see my role here today is not so much to talk about my own research, but to talk about Pakistan as a place for research. And my experience there was that it was extremely welcoming, and that local and national levels of government are very keen on developing culture, what they call cultural tourism, cooperation with other institutions and outside scholars. And so in our 10 days of traveling, we were hosted no less than 4 times at these official functions, right? This was a function where a government minister came and speeches and all kinds of stuff, right? It was kind of fun. It was like we were kind of VIPs, yeah? I'm not sure, but it was fun. And here's our group. This is sort of the second last slide, I think. Oh, yes. I suppose I'll stick with this slide for a sec, just to say that, as much as I think Pakistan is very keen to develop, as I said, this outside cooperation and to develop tourism related to its cultural heritage, it does face a lot of challenges, right? This morning you were talking, Swati, about Bihar as not having a great reputation. Well, I think Pakistan also suffers from a bit of a not such a great reputation. But really, in terms of being there and traveling there and meeting people there, it was a wonderful place to be. Very, very warm, generous, kind people. In terms of, things related to museology, particularly, having started by saying I am in no way, shape, or form a museologist, I can see what did I write down? I wrote some things down. Well, first, bad reputation, lack of resources, right? In terms of because we met curators and directors and whatnot. A lack of expertise, certainly in linguistic, right? The Italian Archaeological Mission has been there since 1955. And in the Swat Museum, you can see the Jeep that Giuseppe Tucci drove around in, right? That's one of the first things they have. You come in the front door and there's Tucci's Jeep. And the Italian Archaeological Mission still has a presence there, but this is archaeology. This is not museology so much. I think they have no Indic languages taught more or less anywhere. I made contact with. I found one person teaching Sanskrit, and I was supposed to. I'm supposed to meet him. Of course, they have a history of unscientific excavation, right? So that they have these thousands of pieces of art from the stupas and from the monasteries, but then first of all, well, which monastery did it come from? Which stupa did it come from? Never mind the question of where was it on the, where was it on the stupa on site? So that unfortunately that knowledge is a lot of it is just lost, right? There's no Buddhist there, right? So when you talk about museums, you were talking about museums as engaging communities. Sometimes I felt when I was traveling like I was the only Buddhist there, right? What to do. So I did some Kora when I was at these sites and whatnot, but really in terms of the idea that the stupa or the monastery or the museum, something could engage a community in a meaningful way. It's a tricky question, I think. And then, of course, I'll be done very soon. I'm on the last couple of points. The textual tradition has been more or less, because they don't have the linguistic experts, and because because I got involved because I work on the Gilgit manuscripts. Well, there's wonderful manuscript collections that come from Gandhara, but mostly they've taken out of the country. The Kharoshthi manuscripts and the Gilgit manuscripts. Okay, and so the last, I guess the last slide, this is the webpage for the upcoming Third International Conference on the Buddhist Heritage of Pakistan. So I'll be participating in this conference. It was supposed to happen March 27th to April 1st and got rescheduled. Then it was supposed to happen May 8th to the 12th and got rescheduled. Now it's supposed to happen on May 19th to the 23rd. So on the 14th of May, I'll be going back to Pakistan to participate in this conference. And we'll see how things go. Yes. Okay. Thank you. That's everything I wanted to say.
When you present your paper in Pakistan, share the link with us.
Okay.
Especially with the Indian people.
So I would like to have the link.
Yeah, link will helpful because
Okay.
this
Sure.
is extremely beautiful, extremely very resourceful site.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I was thinking that over lunch. I mean, you're coming from Bihar, where you have, of course, there's a lot of similar things, a lot of Buddhist archaeological sites and material remains and whatever, and then there's, in a way, a very different but comparable localized site. I don't know, a 1,000 kilometers away or 1,500 kilometers away, but the kind of communication between the two, I don't know if any happens. Maybe some, I don't know. Yeah.
But yes, I think lecture link will help
Okay.
us a lot in gaining the insight about what's going on there.
Sure.
while happening
Sure.
this.
Yes. The conference, I think you're correct that the conference will at least be partially online, maybe wholly online. I was given the option, after they rescheduled it twice, I was given the option of presenting my paper online, right, as they continue to worry about whether anything will even happen. Yeah. Yes, because I 2 times I rescheduled my flights. I cannot reschedule a third time, I don't think. So
In this science,
so in these sites, I think you did mention you are the only Buddhist person there, right? So there is no concept of veneration or anything.
There, yes, I said it felt like I was the only Buddhist there. Now, I met a tour guide who sent me some videos and pictures of him taking around groups of Buddhist monks from Vietnam, Buddhist monks from other countries, where they do essentially a pilgrimage, right? Where they go to these sites and they do some practice. Yes, there are a few. I'm not sure how many of them are local, right? I came from Nepal and I just mentioned monks coming from Vietnam, but it's certainly not, as much as it's presented as cultural tourism and they talk about humanistic Buddhism. I think it's not, it's not something that is, forbidden, right? They seem to be pretty open. We had, I said we had these functions, these government functions. So we, at the picture I showed, we had a local person. Then we had later in our trip dinner with a retired Pakistani army general who had been appointed as the head of tourism development. And so he was, and he was talking about, yes, of course, pilgrimage. If Buddhists want to come and do practice at these sites, of course, this is fine, right?
Yeah, I was sort of related to that, Joe. I was just wondering, were you taken around by guides who had been trained by, say, the Department of
so there were maybe 30 invited people, and then there were 3 sort of academic specialists. There was an art historian who had a PhD in Gandharan art and she was working as in a postdoc at the Boston Museum. Desi, I can't remember Desi's last name. Then Elisa Ilori came with us on the trip. She was, as I say, kind of the co-head of the Italian archaeological mission. And then we had Stefan Baums from Munich, who does inscriptions mostly. And then, of course, we met, we had faculty from this Takshila Institute for Archaeology and Civilizations traveling with us. We met the curators of museums and the directors of, regional archaeological offices.
I guess my curiosity was about whether or not there is a kind of, whether it's placed in an educational context. Let's say if you had a group of young Pakistani students or college students coming, would there be a sense of conveying the history of the region in a meaningful way?
I didn't see a lot of that. There were certainly, every site had a plaque. One side in English, one side in Arabic. In terms of, there were, of course, there were some local attendants working at these sites. And there were guides, yes, there were guides. So I didn't get to see a lot of that because we were always with this group, right? We had our own kind of people with us. But I think that there was, I think we met some locals who would serve as guides, whether their knowledge was, so high, so low, who knows? I'm not sure.
But it's very striking the difference between that kind of setting and what Swasti was referring to earlier, where we say, how do you bridge between living, ongoing veneration of objects and sites, that also have a kind of that are being preserved by a museum, etc., but a living tradition. Whereas here you're kind of looking at, I don't know, ancient Roman artifacts with modern Christians looking at them and trying to make sense of, ancient material.
One thing I would add, I suppose, is that when we visited a lot of these sites, there's virtually no one there, right? So I think that the I don't think they're popular, weekend excursions for a lot of people.
That's kind of a striking contrast to what I, about a year and a half ago in December, I was at Nalanda again, and you couldn't move. There were so many groups on the weekend, whereas 10 years earlier, it was like a ghost town, I mean,
Interesting.
even
Yeah,
things
yeah,
like,
that's interesting.
the tea shops and all had quadrupled because there's so many visitors now, and the quality of the education, like the material
Right.
available, is much improved from what it was.
Yeah.
Bihar now don't want to promote only Nalanda. We are very much eager to promote different Buddhist site. Like there is a fantastic stupa called Kesariya Stupa. Kesariya Stupa was the place where Lord Buddha left his begging bowl before going to Mahaparinirvan for the Lichavis.
Yes.
And that site is not fully excavated. It's only partial excavated. So yes, government is putting lot of effort to bring back that Buddhist heritage back in Bihar, and we want to assimilate that heritage with local community through museum, through site, through research and translation, through exhibition, through lecture seminar courses, with everything.
I really felt that and growing interest. Yeah. Yes. Gerd and Swasti, and then we'll have a break and resume the conversation and end the day. But let's have Gerd and
No.
Okay, so just a small question. So I kind of watched a YouTube video lately, and it was basically an interview with a Pakistani person who said he is Buddhist. And the whole video was about the surviving Buddhist community in Pakistan. So not kind of something new, but a few thousand, it says, thousand people in Pakistan who still consider themselves Buddhist. Did you have any
no, we can't.
Comment on that anyway?
My comment is I'm happy to hear.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's my comment. Yeah. We had no
contact with
contact.
Yeah. And the other question is, what is the security situation there? So because here in the North Kandahar, I mean, it's still there was a war recently between Afghanistan and Pakistan, right? I don't know if it's over even. Right? There have been issues in Kashmir, kind of pretty severe. Is that an issue?
When I was there, we traveled with security.
Okay.
Yeah, we had yes, we traveled. The simplest way to put it is we travel with security.
My question I thought was related, but it was not related. I was concerned about the security of the site. You were concerned about the security of people. So I was just going to ask about who maintains these sites. Are they protected heritage sites?
Yes.
Because they look fairly clean.
Yes, they're they're fenced.
They're fenced as well.
Yes,
and people
absolutely.
just cannot walk inside.
No, definitely not. Even everything. I mean, the answer is yes and no. The monastery sites I showed you, the Ashokan rock edict. This is all fenced and there's people there. I didn't show you another rock cut Buddha. It's just on the side of a road, right? You're just driving down the road, you pull off, and then there's a rock, and then there's a rock cut Buddha on the side of the road. The one higher up the hill, the large one that I did show you, this requires stopping on the side of the road and then trekking for 15 or 20 minutes uphill until you get to these large, these humongous boulders up on the side of the hill. So I think this was not protected.
Yeah, because when we lack community ownership, of the objects or of the architecture, then it becomes very challenging, as Lumbini faces. So the other question was, since you did mention about some Vietnamese monks coming there to visit, so in Lumbini and other sites of Greater Lumbini, usually when we have these pilgrimages from different countries, or even Nepali monks and practitioners visiting these pilgrimage sites, they are archaeological sites as well. So they are allowed to practice a level of their religious practices of intangible cultural heritage, chanting songs, lighting incenses, making offerings. How did you notice if they were
didn't-
allowed to do anything of that sort there?
Chanting, I was sent videos by the tour guide. So yes, standing, a group of monks standing in front of some of these sites and chanting. Yes, yes, making offerings. Yes, yeah, yeah. No, it was yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Let's begin our final session. So I've been asked to kind of handle this last bit. Mostly we can just continue with our questions and answers, but just by way of reaction, personally, is that one interesting thing is Kathmandu may become the nexus between Bihar and Pakistan, because I've been getting messages all afternoon from an assistant director of archaeology in Pakistan, so Dr. Fawad Khan. But I was intrigued with the issue of access. Joe pointed out the problem with the Gilgit manuscript reproductions, and anyone who's ever had to work from microfiche or from bad photocopies knows that sometimes even working out whether you're looking at a diacritical or fly poop, can be a challenge when you're working with manuscripts. But particularly when the issue is the need to do a comparison, as Maria had talked about earlier. To do a critical edition, you cannot use one manuscript. You really need a number of them. What I found, my original work was on Stotra Sangra, the hymns, Sanskrit Buddhist hymns. And what was very interesting was to see them over the range of a century or so, dating them according to their colophons. And the way in which errors were made was often very telling itself. So anyway, but if anyone has any questions now, that we can spend a few minutes. We don't have a whole lot of time, but anything more you'd like to comment on or ask about? Anything you'd like to point out?
I'm particularly interested in where should we go from now?
Okay, great. Yeah, this in a way is a planning conference, so to speak. It's we have this wonderful opportunity that Swati has been able to join us, that our own local source in Sharad Casa is here. So looking at what can we do as at RYI, also of course Swati with all her many connections, not only with RYI but with all the museums in Nepal. So looking at the ways in which we can perhaps RYI can provide a service to the larger community, the scholarly, academic, but also to the popular, for the whole purpose of museum education, etc. So thoughts about that would be very welcome. One thing is simply having these gatherings, I think, is a very useful thing to do. Obviously, some back and forth. You've had some opportunity already in December, was it, or in January? Yeah, where you were able to meet in Patna, and I think that being able to repeat that, obviously, Maria is very interested in seeing what the collection is, but I think that would be true of many of us here at RYI, to take a look and see what the catalog reveals and how much more needs to be done on that. Yeah. Yes, Abhishek.
Yeah, you just mentioned how Kathmandu can be a bridge between Pakistan and Bihar. based on your knowledge about Kathmandu's history, maybe more than most of Kathmandu people, do you think we had that particular history? I mean, being a bridge between ancient India and then modern interpretation of Buddhism, maybe Kathmandu's role in that history.
Well, yes, I mean, as you know from taking my class, a lot of the emphasis that we make is that here in Kathmandu, we have the survival of what you could call greater Indian Buddhism. It's a continuous living tradition, not a rediscovery. And I think that that's a very significant point. Right? I also think that what's something very noticeable just in the years like since most of you have begun your studies is that we've gone from being a purely like Nyingma Kagyu Institute, that's to say purely Tibetan studies, and a growing interest in Newar studies. Eh? We have a number of people doing work, either textual work or ethnographic work on Newar Buddhism and Newar, the history of Buddhism in Kathmandu Valley. So I think that that's a particular resource that we have. Right? So similarly, just the business of manuscripts, what's available in the National Archives, what's available in the 8,000 text of the Asha Safukuti, is a very, very important resource going forward. Yeah. And I think it means that we can be a particular help, I think, to the community in Bihar that's looking, so. Partly too, because one thing that drives, I think, the growth, earlier I made a reference to how many more people go to Nalanda now than 15 years ago. One big factor is that Bodh Gaya is right down the road, and you've got such a very large international Buddhist community there. But, it's a similar situation here, I think, too. Yeah.
Just because Deanne said what from here, so I'm glad Abhishek and Father touched upon what I had in my mind. I thought maybe it's not relevant, but then because they did touch upon, so I was also thinking, why doesn't the language center of RYI also include Newari language, Nepal Bhasa? So that was in my mind, but I thought maybe not relevant. But since both of them did speak about it, because I think Sharadai will know much better on how many places teach Nepal Bhasa already. But I think out here you get some academic degree. So do we have Nepal Bhasa learning centers which give a kind of a degree? So learning will mean script as well as
yes,
you mean as an epigraphist?
Epigraphist, yeah.
Yeah, so when you learn the language, I think you need to learn the script as well.
Actually, so there is in theory, we have the framework for this. About 2 or 3 years ago, we laid out a sort of program for 4 levels of Newar studies. I think WLAN is the code we've given them to them. But there's a little more planning that has to be done. We have to work out who would be the personnel, to teach the language. But you did touch on something very important, because I think doing the epigraphy, being able to read Bujimo and Prachalit and Ranjana, etc., would have to be, a very critical part, at least for the upper levels of the Newar study. And I think that somebody like, Sharad would be an indispensable advisor, at least, if not a participant, given your vast knowledge of the scripts. Yeah.
नमस्ते जो नेपाली ढाए नि
नेपालीबाट भन्नुहोस् न
हुन्छ अनि हाम्रो चाहिँ नि यो पुरानो म्यानुस्क्रिप्टको चाहिँ नि अभिलेख सम्पादन भनेर नेपाल भाषा केन्द्रीय विभाग सेन्ट्रल डिपार्टमेन्ट अफ नेपाल भाषा त्यहाँ चाहिँ नि पठन पाठन पनि भइरहेछ अनि के चाहिँ नि त्यो विद्यार्थीहरूले त्यसको एडिटिङ गर्छ अनि मोस्ट अफ चाहिँ नि यो म्यानुस्क्रिप्ट चाहिँ नि यो आशार्गसबाट नै लिने हो अनि अरू फेरि चाहिँ नि एउटा यो अमेरिकाको एउटा मलाई ठ्याक्क नाम बिर्स्यो एसियन लेगेसी लाइब्रेरी अल्सो एउटा छ एसियन लेगेसी लाइब्रेरी आई थिङ्क अमेरिकामा या त्यहाँबाट पनि बुद्धिस्ट चाहिँ नि हाम्रो चाहिँ नि यो आर्काइभ्सको चाहिँ नि यो स्तोत्र तन्त्र अनि प्रज्ञापन आदि इत्यादि ट्रान्सलेसनको चाहिँ के उहाँहरूले काम गर्नु भएको छ
अनि तपाईँहरू textual digital copies
digital copies हजुर yes
so yeah, talking about ways in which the Asha archives have interfaced with international institutions, in particular this the
Asian Legacy Library.
Asian Literacy Library, yeah. So yeah. Any others? Thoughts, comments? What about more thoughts about ways to take this forward concretely? Obviously, it would help if we started doing, it would be a good thing. I think if we get the Newar studies, the Newar language courses going, that would be a plus. I wonder though concretely about how would we structure something like helping, Swati's institution, the Bihar Museum Society. How do, it's nice to say we have the resources or we have the skills to help them, but how would we, concretely work that out, is something that I think maybe we don't come up with the solution right here today, but it's something that we do have to think about, the modalities, the methods by which we can do things.
First of all, why not we have a lecture or talk which introduce what capacity Bihar Museum has, or Patna Museum collection has, and how RYI help us to bring some output from that resource, the big output. So I think in a lecture and talk, we discussed this point. And as I said, from my perspective, from my museum perspective, we are not limited only to the translation. We are very open for having this kind of exhibition, which come out from the text, like read the text and bring some contemporary artwork. Yeah. And then we indulge community, we indulge visitors, like this is the text we have, and we contemporary artists interpret that text in this way. So this is the outcome, and that outcome is very useful for the community which we are serving. They are not Buddhists, they all are Hindu, Muslim, and the Christians, they all are from the different background, very less Buddhist, but they are very open to, like I am Hindu, but I am very open to know about the root past of the Bihar that is majorly played by Buddhist history. So why not we don't know about our past history, and although we lost that trace, but RYI help us in doing that. They have the scholar who help us in translating that Tibetan and the Sanskrit text, and from that output we bring exhibition, we bring talks and seminar which help community to understand what heritage we are having. So why not we start with this? Thank you.
Anyone else? Bihar does have a certain academic resource, as you know, in the place we referred to earlier, Navanalanda Mahavihara University, which I think is a deemed university at this point. That's to say it's an autonomous college, so to speak. But it's really a Pali institute, as far as I can tell. That still seems to be a very, very strong Theravada influence and focus because of its founders, of Bhikkhu Kashyap. Yeah. Any other comments or thoughts? I'll hand back to Diane.
Thank you so much, Father Greg. That was very dynamic and a good way to wrap up and think about it, have ideas, and perhaps we can implement them. So now we're in contact, so we should keep contact and see how we can collaborate. I'm looking forward to visit the archives tomorrow. We'll bring a few people with us. So this kind of thing, and Namila is a good example of people doing research with the resources that we have. So all of this is kind of hopeful for how to move forward. So to close this session, I would like to invite Julia to come with me. And we would like to thank, please come. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, the foot. Sorry. I thought you were shy. So we would like to first of all, thank you, Swati, for bringing all the way from VR and being so open to collaborate. This is quite amazing because I think it means a lot for us because we train people, we and teach, we put all our energy, and then seeing different ways that these training can actually be of help and be openings for students. So we would like to thank you for having come, and we hope for the best for the future.